outside the religious world and are kind of confused in their relationship between the church world and the business world. And I try to help them navigate all that. So we talk a lot about how most of what God does actually happens outside of church through people not in the ministry. I have a second organization called Compassionate Justice International. That was birthed out of a tragedy that happened in 1987 in Zimbabwe when I had 16 of my friends massacred on a peace and reconciliation project. And after a 20-year hiatus of not dealing with the issue in 2007, God kind of put his finger on me and said, you got to get healed up from the pain. And I wrote a book called Saving Zimbabwe, and out of that has come a lot of humanitarian and development projects. And the last piece of this is the National Center for Peace, which I run with my wife, Abigail, who's in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe right now. And that has to do with trying to heal a lot of the tensions that are in the country right now that are both tribal and racial. You're muted, Teresa. You muted yourself.
Oh, thank you. So thank you, Bob. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm not going to repeat what I said because I was saying something really nice about you, Bob.
Okay, good. I don't want my head to swell.
No, we don't. No, we don't. I am going to ask Dr. Mpindu, please introduce yourself.
Francis is my name. I'm Zimbabwean, proud Zimbabwean, African Canadian. I live in Toronto. I'm a chaplain with a police service here in the Greater Toronto area. I've been doing that for the last 16 years. I have taught at university level in a Christian environment. I was a pastor for several years until we had some conflicts in the church. Didn't know how to handle them. Ended up switching into alternative dispute and conflict resolution as a calling. And have just written a book on community policing, just off the press. And yep, that's it about me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. VK. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh, I thought maybe you had muted me. Anyway, my name is VK Vugani, actually Vugani, which means wake up, Amoyo. Also go by VK. I often have a challenge just introducing myself, but I'll do the best I can for now. I live in Dallas, originally from Zimbabwe, born in the Bulawayo area of Rwanda. And married with 3 daughters. Here in Dallas, I do a few things, including in a software. I'm into the software. I guess you could call it a developer. But my passion is really on relationships. Marriage relationships being the second one, the first obviously being with relationship with God, a relationship in a marriage setting, and all other relationships, including work, race relations, tribal relations, and so forth. I think maybe we'll take it from there. Hopefully, I'll be able to define myself even further as we discuss. Thank you.
Praise God. Thank you, Mr. VK. Can I please ask Mr. Mark and Ms. Debbie to introduce yourselves? Tell us what you are about and where you are.
My name is Debbie. My husband is Mark. And I've known Teresa for many, many years since we knew each other when we were young in Zimbabwe. My parents went there when I was 3, and I stayed in Zimbabwe, grew up there from 1970 to 1985. So my reason for being invited here is that I just want to learn, and I wanted to have a dialogue, and I wanted to listen. And so Teresa said, hey, would you be willing to be part of this discussion? So my husband is Mark. We've been married 30 years this year. We live in South Carolina right now. We've lived in other parts of the world at other times. And we are here to learn and to be part of the ongoing conversation.
Glory to God. Now, what Debbie kind of missed is the fact that the reason why I was comfortable in reaching to her outside of the fact that I know her parents and I can call them and tell them. Now, I also saw her post. I was drawn by her post. On her post, and I am paraphrasing and probably just summarizing it. Basically, she was saying she feels our pain and she hears all these cries. What she wanted to ask, she had one specific question: how can I help? What can we do? And I said, now that's the person to have a dialogue with. They are ripe. They are ready. So thank you so much, Deb, for posting that. Miss Mel, are you on?
Yes.
Hey, there you go, Melissa and James, please. Oh, I have two Mels, Melissa and James, and then I have Melody. Melody, I can only see half your face. There you go. Beautiful. Melissa and James, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Melissa Kelly, and this is my husband, James. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I grew up here. I grew up in Bethlehem, and now I live in Makanji. We've been married for 5 years, and we have 2 toddler boys, and I am a credit analyst. And I'm here because I hope that we can shed some light to people on what it's like and some of the misconceptions that people have about interracial couples. And I hope everybody is just ready to, learn and grow.
Amen.
I'm
Mr.
also
James.
a software developer like Mr. BK, and I like people, and I like going out there and talking, but it's been an experience of learning to take a step back and listen and learn, and I want to express some of that too.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. This couple is the only couple on here I can claim as my children. So just everyone knows. So I handle them with care. Will you please? Mr. Mel, Miss Melody, please introduce yourself and your husband.
Hi, it's really my turn. Sorry. Sorry.
Yes, it is.
So we have 3 in our household now. I'm Dr. Melody Nadeau, and I teach at Siena College. I teach freshman seminar students from all over the world. And I teach people who would like to educate other people in the English language. So that's kind of my main job. And then this is my husband, AJ. We have traveled to Zimbabwe a couple of times. We had a sister church there. We live in the Albany, New York area. We had a sister church there. And when their pastor came and spoke to us one day, it changed our lives. Yeah. And so we wanted to know, this was during 2007 or so. And so it was very, very difficult time in Zimbabwe. So we went, and he said, oh, I thought you were lying when you said you would come and see us, because he wanted us to come. So when we came, he was so surprised. So then we reached out to, Teresa was connected to Siena College where I work at that time through the Dangwa initiative. And that's how we met. Yeah. And then this is, and my husband AJ has walked for Zimbabwe. He raised money by walking 200 miles one time for one summer for them. Was that right? About 200?
About 200 miles. Yeah.
And so, and then this is our newest member of our household, Prince Asante. He is a student from Ghana. Do you want to say anything about yourself? Or?
Yeah. So I'm a student from Ghana. I came to the United States in 2019, and then I'm a bio major. So I came to spend the summer with my professor. I would say she was my FYSM professor last 2 semesters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then she told me that, like we have a conversation or like a dialogue going on that I may be interested in joining. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. So yeah, just to join.
So we can't quite all get in together because we're just finishing our dinner, but we're here and we're listening, and we need to listen. That's why we're here, because we need to listen.
Right.
We don't understand the level of tension that still exists in our country. We understand why people would have pain, but we don't understand why other people don't believe that, I guess.
Right.
Does that make sense, Teresa?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense. So thank you, everyone. Joanna, I think Joanna had said she was going to be excusing herself. So I think she has, I'm not sure. Are you there, Joanna? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I do, but I'm running. I really want to stay, but I'm running late for a lesson, but I'm going to come right back afterwards if possible. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Joanna.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Jody.
Welcome.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Half hour. All right, bye.
Sure. Erin, are you there? Can you hear us? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hold on, I can also do video. Hi.
Hey, Erin.
Hi, my name's Erin. Sorry, I see you guys over here, so I'll probably keep my video off. But I'm one of James's many cousins, and he shared that you guys were going to be having this conversation, and I just thought it would be really nice to listen and hear all of your perspectives. So.
Oh, praise God. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. And again, this is the Dialogue with Pastor T, and we are talking about racism right here in the US. So before we go any further, I want us to define racism. What is it? So I am throwing this because this is a dialogue. Unless I find that one of you is not speaking or one of you is taking too much time, I am going to call upon you. So what is your understanding of racism? Now, remember, in this dialogue, there is no right or wrong. It is what it is. You understand? So whatever you believe to be racism, please talk to us. What is racism? Anyone can pick it up. Try not to all speak at the same time.
I think prejudice exists for all things and can be just a preconceived notion of something, but racism includes the connotation of hate and includes the connotation of specifically separate human races. And it also carries the connotation of institutional and systemic racism, which a lot of people leave out of it. They like to think of it as just racial bias, which is a broader definition of racism. But usually when people are referring to racism, they're specifically referring to systemic and institutional racism that affects multitudes.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Mr. James.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share their definition or their understanding of it?
Well, if I can jump in, I'm not sure I'm defining it, but I'm putting out something that maybe we can chew on and discuss. Well, racism, I think we could have a dictionary definition of it, but maybe what's more important the operational use of the word or the term racism.
Okay.
Basically, the way I see it is the ability or the tendency for some people to use the differences, skin difference or whatever difference you have with somebody. In case of race, because of its race, we'll use the skin color to use that to their advantage and to the disadvantage of somebody else. I think that's when it really fits into what we often call racism. Either by actively doing that or by passively doing it. Either way. So I think that's probably the operational side of racism, which, by the way, it can come from either side. Okay, it can come from either side, from the one who's taking the benefit or who's getting the benefit, or the one who's denied the benefit. Because so it works both ways. But I think what is it, James?
Yes.
I think what James was talking to is what we tend to use a lot of it. We tend to use a lot of racism, if I can call it the medium. We use the medium of wealth. Or access to wealth. So a lot of time, these prejudices, we look at them mostly as they pertain to the access to wealth. So that's why a lot of times people will look at racism as because I cannot get this or that, and somebody else can, or have access to this, or I'm viewed this way or that way. A lot of it has to do with materialism. Let me put it that way, at least in the broader sense. But it goes to other areas. But I think one of the broader ones is there. I thought I'll throw it in there. And having said that, let me just put something. I like talking, so maybe I can say something that we can pick on and run with it. You see, here's how I call myself, I'm a profiler, right? I'm a profiler, whether you call it race or whatever it is. I call myself a profiler. And I think it's okay for us to be profilers, because when you're profile, you're giving yourself an opportunity to learn. Now, I think a lot of times, I think of the FBI profile division. When somebody commits a crime, they can send an FBI profiler, and that FBI profiler will try and get into the mind of the perpetrator and try to understand what is driving them, so they can maybe better be able to catch them. So I think maybe too often we want to run away from the idea of being profilers, which I believe we should be. But what we should do is use that profile to generate our interest or ignite our interest to learn more about the other, so that maybe we can find a way to work together and understand each other and bring more harmony. Because sometimes when we say profiler, we already think, oh, you don't want to mess with others. But I think we can turn that around for our benefit. Something to chew on.
Thank you, Mr. VK. Appreciate it. Anyone else want to tackle that? Either build on what has already been said, or bring in a different perception?
Well, I wanted to just throw something interesting, because Melissa and James are not the only interracial couple in this group. because I'm married to a Black Zimbabwean as well. And I'm not trying to do a sidebar here, but I just thought this was so relevant. I was going through my news today, and I saw this interview with this talk show host, Black talk show host named Eve, who's married to a white man. And anyway, she was talking about how the fact that they've had some really intense discussions over the last week. And this statement she made really caught my eye. She said, but at the same time, it's a beautiful thing because I don't know his life through his eyes, she explained. He doesn't know my life through my eyes. All he can do is try to understand and try to ask the questions. And he wants to understand. And that's what the nation and what the world has to do. And I really thought that was a really interesting way to talk about it. And so let me just segue into this, is that I do a little seminar from time to time called Perceptions, Perspectives, Paradigms. And it's the 3 Ps. And the way that I explain it is that our 5 senses, our 5 senses accumulate information. They're our data receptors. So every day our 5 senses are exposed to all kinds of data, right? But what do we do with it? How do we process it? Well, we process that through our perspectives. But where do we get our perspectives? We actually get our perspectives from our subcultures. And our first subculture, of course, is our families. So our families, the adults in our families, they tell us where to look, what to see, and how to process that information. And it creates a perspective. And then as we get older, our peers influence us, and then our teachers, and then we go to university. And so one of the things that's hard as a sociologist for me sometimes is once you understand all the subcultures, it's almost boring to get into a discussion because you already know what everyone's going to say, because we tend to repeat all of our subculture narratives. So it's really hard sometimes to have these discussions for me because I pretty much know what your perspective is going to be. So I find it fascinating when somebody just throws a wrench at me and comes with a perspective that's different, from their subcultures. So the reason I'm saying all that is because I think that, in my view, racism is a perspective. It's a set of glasses that you're given, and that set of glasses evaluates everything with the first context of being race. So you're looking through these glasses at the world, and your first filter is race. Define everything by race. So it doesn't necessarily, it can be negative. It isn't always negative. Yeah. So for those of us that are in the world of peace and reconciliation, I got to be honest. The 2 words that I never use are racism and white privilege. And the reason is it's the same reason why I don't ever tell anyone I'm a Christian. Even if they ask me, I never tell them. And here's why. I never know what they mean. Like when somebody asks me, are you a Christian? I have no idea what that person thinks a Christian is. So if I just say yes, based on my perspective, there could be 1,000 things that person on the other side is hearing, right? Because you just don't know. Well, it's the same thing with words like racism and white privilege. When you use those words, what ends up happening in the peace and reconciliation circles is you immediately put a whole bunch of people on the defensive because they see those things as negative, right? And so if you say you're a racist or you have white privilege, and they just reel, and you've already lost the discussion because of the fact that their emotions have kicked into gear and they're on the defensive and they just quit listening. So it's depending on what they're great words when you're an activist and you're trying to poke you poke and prod and make people, kind of, you're kind of want to get in their face. They're great words, but they're not really great words in trying to build bridges.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective. So I like your reasoning in not using those words
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying they're in a certain context, they're very right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying to build bridges with people, you use those two words and immediately people's defenses go up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
You've already
think
lost them.
yeah. I guess you are right. It depends with the audience, right? It depends on who you are speaking to, because if I were to ask anyone on here if white privilege is a thing or not, or do you, for specifically to my white family and friends, do you feel you are more privileged, or do you feel that you do you feel like you're more privileged than others?
Yep.
I have to agree with what Bob just said, because I've ran into those discussions where people put up a wall as soon as you mention like someone being a racist, because I feel like it's such a broad term and there's so many different definitions. So someone can say, well, I don't hate Black people, but they don't understand that some of the things that they're doing are pretty racist. And I guess like an example would be maybe like in the workplace, when maybe like managers and supervisors always follow up and check on like the Black employee to see whether or not they're doing their job. In their mind, they think they're doing their job of supervising, but really what's really behind that is them not confident enough that the Black employee will be able to produce whatever results that they're looking for. So they have to follow up on them, but they don't see that as being racist. And that's just an example. I have not experienced that yet, but I have seen it happen to other people.
So it's kind of funny, and with all my friends, we got an understanding, all my Black friends. It's this: you can call me ignorant, call me naive, just don't call me a racist. And they all get it, right? Because they don't like the word either. Nobody likes the word. It's like the most, like I said, the minute you say it, it's like this lightning rod. Everybody like gets jabbed with the, with 220 volts. And so we never use the word. They'll go, oh, you're such an idiot. And I laugh about it, right? I go, yeah, you're right. I'm an idiot. I didn't get it, right? It's just what's happened is those words have become so politicized that they now carry on such huge implications that it just, I diffuse. So I'll tell you an interesting story. If I'm with my white friends and I say to them, do you have white privilege? I've already lost them. Immediately the defenses go up and boom, right? But if I say this, hey, do you think there's any advantages of being white? Everybody's hand goes up. Why is that? See? The reason is because the word white privilege has become so adversarial, so, so confrontive, so shame-based, all this kind of stuff that you lose the discussion. So I am trying, my brain is always looking at how can I get there without using words that create people to immediately go on the defensive. And it's funny, if you just twist a few things around and use less, word, you could say the same thing in a different way and you get a completely different response. And it's the same question.
Yep.
It's crazy, that perspective that it's a shame-based thing, because you could almost think of it like a superpower. When I was a kid, I could mouth off to cops and I'm still here. And I was literally, a witness to Melissa having her original last name, Mafundikwa, and applying to a job and applying to the exact same job with the exact same resume when she got my last name and getting a callback for Kelly. And I'm just like, if that's not proof right there.
Yeah. We just had this conversation 2 nights ago. My friend Dr. Boney from Zimbabwe applied for a job using his Zim name, never even got a call back. He put the same resume through with Mark Jones,
Mm.
and got a call right back within 24 hours. And see, now,
funny, but it's
all my
also
white friends that were
horrifying.
listening were like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So the reality of it is most people are just ignorant. Like when they heard that, they were like, oh my God, I never heard of, I didn't realize.
Mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I have a
And the
question
other thing
about-
is,
Oh, sorry.
I think the other thing is, I think that it highlights is where we now operate too much on sound bites.
Mm.
You know, you just say one word and you believe you've explained everything. And going further, we're not creating enough time for us to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine, for those of us who are married, can you imagine if when you first saw your current spouse, you were just using one-line zingers? How much success would you have gone? Maybe you just meet today and you say, honey, and just you leave it at that. Or you meet the next day, you just a few words. You probably would not have been very successful. But success comes from engaging.
Yeah.
Discussion. If somebody says, well, okay, I'm going shopping, all right? Somebody may be meaning I'm just going to the mall and just looking around. Somebody may be going to the mall and buying a whole lot of things, spending a lot of money. But if you just take the word shopping, it's pregnant. It can mean many things. You get better understanding when you get more discussion. So I think one of the things that we can do is to find more time. I used the word profiler before. Find more time to try and understand somebody that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Try and understand their perspective.
Amen.
And maybe also give the benefit of the doubt and say, well, you know, this person doesn't understand me, or I don't understand them. Let me just try and be in their shoes, understand it from their perspective. I like to use a cell phone charger to say, well, you know, a lot of these issues is if I say, describe this here, you give me a description. Hopefully you can see this. But if we start arguing over what you see and what I see, we may never agree. And yet we're talking about the same thing. We just need to turn around and see the other perspective. Then there could be better understanding. Now, I think as it comes to race, I think it's the way I see it. It's people are not committing enough time to get to discover. You know, a few years ago, I applied for a budget rental agency. Everything went great, and you know, everything was approved and everything. And the final step was for me to go to meet this regional area manager for the area that we live in, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma, and all that, to get the final note, where the location and everything, and just go and meet, and then take it from there. And they asked me to fax in my driver's license, and I faxed in my driver's license, and the process stopped. Yeah, it never went forward, and the area manager, you know, all of a sudden the appointment that we already had got rescheduled, and he was no longer available to, you know, it eventually didn't happen. So I was just curious as I reached out to him later, which, by the way, I never got to speak to him again, because I could never. I was just curious. I was like, okay, was it because he saw the picture on my driver's license, or was it something else that came up? Because everything was all go until I send a copy of my driver's license. And to that, for me, it was, I'm not sure what race he was. because I didn't meet him. He didn't have like a standard English name. Just like my name doesn't sound standard, right? So I was very curious to know. So it's such things where we're very easy to then get to a place where you say, well, okay, it's because of my color, the color of my skin. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I tried to put an effort to understand, but then I wasn't able to get that. And so I'm saying that to say that it's also incumbent upon everyone to go the extra mile just to try and understand what's going on. Because not doing so, then we get, this tunnel vision or whatever we've been cultured, the culture that we've come from and we've come to understand will reign supreme. And then it becomes more and more difficult for us to change our ways because we literally cocoon ourselves. And so as we interact, I think let's think about that. Let's bring matters to this and have an honest discussion, because you will have disagreements, no doubt.
Yeah.
With people, even from family. Even in family, you find some isms within families. So these isms are not just limited to race, but I think the bigger and easier one is often race. So I think if we just commit to learning more, I like to learn. Okay, like I say that I profile my wife so I can be maybe more relevant as a lover to her. So I think profiling is good. That means we're seeking to understand the other better, and then we just need to make sure that we turn that for the better, not for the negativity, not to feed the myth, but to change it.
With my white friends, one of the things that came up this week was, well, what do black people want? I mean, it's like,
what a question,
want, right? and I said to him, I go, oh, we're so white. So I said to him, I go, okay, guys, here, let me give you something that we'll just start with one thing here. So I said, right now, I said, you guys all know this because you all been to marriage counseling. Like, what always happens when we go to marriage counseling? There's a big conflict. And what's the conflict? The conflict is we're white men, and we've all been trained that when our families are in danger, we go to war and fight. And when there's a problem, we fix it, right? So, we're just constantly, halfway out the door whenever there's a problem. And our wives get mad at us. And we're like, what the heck's wrong with you? I'm solving the problem. I'm fixing it. And always the line comes back, but you're not listening.
Yeah.
You're not listening. You're not feeling me. You're not understanding me, right? And so I told and when I said that, all of a sudden the light goes on, because all the white guys get that, because we've all been to marriage counseling and got our butts whipped because we weren't good listeners.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know how to listen to our wives. And so I said, just take the lesson you learned in marriage counseling and apply the same thing to this race issue. Just listen, empathize, hear, try to understand. It's the same dynamics. And everybody goes, oh, I can do that.
So, Bob, do you think, based on what you just said, do you then think that, or anyone can answer this question, do you think that the resolving or the solving of racial issues is a conversation that needs to be had by white to white versus black to white?
Both and.
Yeah, both.
Both.
Yeah, see, sometimes, it's the same thing that happens when women go, out to eat. I mean, the conversation that women will have with each other will totally change if a man shows up.
Yeah.
There's just a reality of certain dynamics, whether, and so it's the same thing with me. It's just like, it's easier for me to have a conversation with my white friends first and sort of help them, this may surprise, it surprises some of my black friends, but I go, I go, the whole issue of race so dominates your life.
Mm-hmm.
I go, guys like me, I said, I grew up in a town. We never had a black person. I didn't even know black people existed until 1968. Somebody shot a black guy. And then all these black people were telling me they were going to burn my house down. And this was, of course, Dr. King, right? I didn't know. You know, then I went to high school, and I was telling some guys today that, you know, we had, our high school was 20 years old. And I played football. And so there were 20 pictures on the wall of all the football teams. And the big joke at my high school was, can you find the black guy? Because we had one black guy in our school in 20 years, right? So one of the things that some black people don't understand, it's not that white people are racist, they're ignorant. They just have never even thought about a lot of this stuff. And so what happens is when these big events happen, like what's going on right now, they're all like deer in headlights. They don't even know how to react to it.
That's true.
They don't understand even some of the basic fundamental things, you know? And it's just because we live in isolated communities, you know? And so I you know, the thing that we're trying to do here in Kansas City, and we're doing it the other night, we just got, you know, a few black guys and a few white guys, and we all sat around, had beers and around a fire and sat outside under the stars and talked. And it was unbelievable what happened.
Yeah.
But it was all because everybody came because I'm confused. Can you explain, you know? And so all the white guys are listening to the black guys, and they're going, oh, wow, I never thought of that. That's never crossed my mind before. And so it was really a powerful thing, but it was so simple.
Actually, you know what?
One of the great misunderstandings I find, the problem with skin color is it gives you the perception we're really different. But the reality of it is underneath, everybody wants the exact same things.
That's true.
Right? And so once you get past the issue that this person has a different veneer than this person, you know, their lamination is a different thing, and you get underneath it, everybody starts realizing, oh my God, I think the same way. I have the same, I want the same thing. I want to have a good family and have a career and have a nice house. And you know what I mean? I want to feel safe and secure. Oh, everybody wants the same thing. And we're not that different.
Yeah.
Once you cross that bridge, it starts bringing everyone together. My problem with the media is they just keep driving everyone apart. They just keep focusing how different we are.
Yes.
I think that's purposeful. I think not just for ratings, but also for, you know, the purposes of the lining of the pockets of, you know, them from the people who are doing it for other reasons. But to the point of the original question and to your point, I also grew up in a lily white community with a number of black people in my high school that I could count on two hands. And the people who need to be having this conversation the most don't necessarily have access to black friends based on their tight-knit community and the fact that they might be a little bit racist themselves. Those are the ones that need to have this conversation. So yes, they need to have it with other white people, even if they're not the right white people, because the conversation needs to happen.
I think that's why Bob said that, you know, it's about ignorance. And I think you're right on the money. I mean, most of you have defined the racism in very, I mean, realistic ways. I just wanted us to go back a little to the point that Bob made about, you know, growing up and developing perspectives, and all you know is people like you. And so you develop a mindset around what is around you. And so you basically grow up in your universe, you know, as to the best of my knowledge, you know, as far as I know, you know, your little world, right? So everything is defined from there. One element I just wanted to bring in is the idea that because we are different, as Bob said, our pigmentations and skin colors because they're different, we start looking at one skin color as having preference or superiority or inferiority. And I think that's where things start going south. Because once I think because I am lighter, I am white. So that means anything that is non-white is inferior and doesn't measure up to me. And I think that's where things really get all entangled up. And I think when we see what is happening in the world today, it's really based on that. One now is superior because they have different skin color. But as Bob said, underneath, we all aspiring and desiring the same thing.
Well, one of the conversations I have with my Zim friends is I said, I go, it's so interesting because you frame everything in a skin color. I go, but you know, nobody came to Africa because you were black. Like nobody cared you were black. You could have been purple and they would have still came. I go, it was never about skin color. It was about selfish ambition and greed.
Domination, yeah.
About domination. And I go, you just happened to get in the way. So, but because they needed a narrative to dominate, they created this us and them kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you bought the lie for a while. And now you figured out, wait a minute, this isn't true.
Exactly.
And so then they got scared because suddenly now you're empowered, right? And so it's interesting to me. There's a lot of things that get defined as racism, but they're actually driven by selfish ambition and greed.
That's right.
And then
the other thing I was going to mention is then you discover that when other people are aspiring to have this, which you already have, you feel threatened that now they're going to be like me. And then, you know, all the defense mechanisms go up.
Well, you know, it's the big thing that's going on in Zim right now is it was, you know, we have these oversimplified narratives. Okay, black people are good, white people are bad. Well, then the Chinese showed up.
Yeah.
And now everybody's going, wait a minute here. This is a little confusing. This is deja vu, you know, like, and what, you know what I mean? And so like, and that's what I keep trying to tell everyone. I go, don't you understand we're all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We are all broken images of the Creator.
Amen.
This isn't a unique problem. This is a problem we all got.
That's right.
You see,
Yes,
I hear what you're saying. On the other hand, I am persuaded to mention that I think when we say some of the white people who are asking some of these questions, what is this noise about, are ignorant. I don't know that I think that they are ignorant. It's hard for me to think that anyone in this day and age, in 21st century, where information is so readily available, that one would remain ignorant.
You'd be surprised.
If I can hop in.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just hoping just as a thought. You see, the idea of ignorance, I think somebody who is perceived to be in the privilege, it's easier for them to be ignorant. Let me put it that way. Now, I'm not just talking about just in race. Now, I can even take it back to say, if we take it to Africa, to Zimbabwe, between the ethnic groups. You see, I come from the minority side of Zimbabwe. You know, the behaviors are not very different from the racial tensions between ethnic groups, because the majority, some will say, well, I don't understand. How can you not speak this language? You live here in Zimbabwe. How can you not speak this language? Because there are many languages, right? So that sort of thing, it's not like they're always speaking that way because they want to push any ism or tribalism or ethnicity. It's because somebody has lived in an environment where some of those things have not been an issue, and they think, well, if you're in Zimbabwe, you speak, let's say, Shona. And then when they meet somebody who speaks a different language and in Zimbabwe, then it's like, okay, why can't you speak? I don't understand you.
That's right.
So the issue here is, it is, if we just take it a little further and extract it to the Christian point of view, the issue is really a heart thing that we have identity issues. Okay. So it is easy to label anything the biggest thing that you are close to. And skin is a huge one because it's visible. Even the scriptures say we should walk not by faith. Not by sight.
Yes.
But you see, this sight plays a very important role, because when we go by sight, it's very easy. Oh, this is a lady. Oh, okay, no, I'm trying to talk to guys. Or this is somebody, the skin color, this is white or they're black. Then you want to associate with the ones who look more like you. So this has many layers. It has many layers. But between that layer, I think the burden really comes with the majority in this way. In this case, we're talking about race. In different countries, we could be talking about ethnic groups. The burden really lies, a lot of it lies with the majority to reach out and try and understand the minority. Because a lot of times the minority understands the majority. Because the minority has their situation and they see the majority and learn and get to see a lot of the majority. If they don't see it by experience, they will see it by hearing. Maybe they're talking about something, and then somebody from the majority says, well, what do you mean? This is not an issue. Because to the majority, it's not an issue, but to the minority, it is. So the minority is learning about the minority situation and the majority situation. At the same time, the majority is not reaching out to understand the minority. And then between that difference, that's where there is this tension, because then the minority will say, no, we understand you, majority. But the majority does not understand the minority.
Have you ever heard of Stanley Crouch?
Sorry?
Have you ever heard of Stanley Crouch? He's a black writer from LA. And he made a statement that just flipped some people out. But I understand where he's coming from. He said, you'd never know listening to the people at the UN, but tribalism is the father of racism.
It is. It is.
So, and this may, this surprises a lot of my black friends, but I tell them, I go, I said, you have to understand that what happened in America in the 1800s is all the white tribes of Europe came to America and reconstituted all the same conflicts. If you watch the movie Gangs of New York, it's just brutal, right? I mean, the English are fighting the Irish, and the Germans are against the Poles, and the Italians are against that, and everybody's white, right? They're all treating each other with disdain, and they all got the same skin color, right? If you go to Asia and you study the dynamics between the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Koreans, you get all the same thing, and yet their race is all Asian, right? So, you study the African continent, right? In Kansas City, this is crazy. In Kansas City, we have 34 different African countries represented here. You know what they all have? Their own churches.
Yeah.
They can't go to black African-American churches because they're afraid of them, right? They won't go to each other's churches. So we got 34 different African, see where I'm going with this? It's like, it's all the same issues. And so I said to somebody one time, I go, this is going to sound really contradictory, but sometimes racism isn't really about skin color. I mean, it is, but there's all these issues.
That's right. It goes beyond.
Underneath that if you took the skin color off, it's the same issue whether we all got the same color skin. And so I think sometimes we end up not being able to solve the problem because we focus too much on the skin color and we don't really deal with all the underlying root issues. Now, the reason why this is where it gets complicated for me. Why don't we? Because who are the people trying to solve the problem? It's government. It's civic organizations. But what we have is a heart problem.
Yes.
That's
yes.
And
right.
government and civic
Yes.
organizations are not qualified. They don't have the tools. All
That's
they
right.
can do is put down rules and laws, to try to, to mitigate these problems.
And you
But-
cannot legislate behavior.
Exactly. So the group that should be out in front of this, who has the most incredible opportunity to transform the world, is the church world, and
That's
we're the
right.
worst. That's what,
right.
I mean, if I'm getting animated, it's because it drives me crazy. Because I'm
Because
looking at
Yeah.
going, you guys.
We've been trained not to do that.
Yes.
I'm
Our
glad
church
you
is
brought
trying-
that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that into the conversation.
Yeah.
So did Mr. VK kind of alluded to that, to the heart problem.
Yeah.
And so let me just put out this question for your own individual experiences, and not necessarily, I mean, you don't want to put anyone on the spot. So feel free to not answer this question, but what are the race relations like in your own churches and in your own neighborhood churches? Because like, for instance, I have an I think it's Anglican church right up my street. And when I visited, sometimes I do go there to visit, and I'm the only Black person there. And they all look at me like, I mean, the priestess come over to me and say, "Can we help you?" Like, yeah, I came to talk to Jesus. Is that okay? It's incredible that, I mean, I don't understand how within the church that we still have these issues. So talk to me about your own experiences within your local churches or churches that you have visited where you seem to be the minority, or maybe you are the one who actually goes and holds someone's hands and say, "Welcome, we are glad you are here." So talk to me about that.
I think the first thing.
Oh.
Oh, okay. No, go ahead.
So we had a really a kind of horrifying experience with our church very recently. We are a probably 90% white church. We have literally about 130 people back in the normal days in attendance. And of those, about 6 to 10 are African or African American. Some people from like African countries, but
Right.
other African American, one Indian guy, and a couple of Hispanics. It's like that. So, and Cajos is a very working class, blue collar, white. Throwback kind of city, to be honest. And we're north of Albany, New York. So while we've been out for COVID, our pastors thought of this great idea and brought sidewalk chalk, and they sent groups of us to bring sidewalk chalk and treats to all of the regular attenders. And we were going to write messages of hope on the sidewalks outside of our homes. And so about a week after that drop, I went to a friend in our small group who happens to be from Nigeria. And I brought her a tree just from me, from AJ and from me as a small group leader. And she came out from her apartment carrying her sidewalk chalk. And she asked me if I would go and write on the sidewalk with her. She had done this beautiful design, and she was afraid as an African woman in a white neighborhood that somebody would call the police if she went out to write on the sidewalk. And this was before George Floyd. This was a few days before. So our church thought that we were being very inclusive and loving to everyone, and because we treat everyone well when they walk through the door, and we include every person no matter where they come from or what they look like in our small groups. We have a very diverse economic and intellectual group in our church, but nobody ever thought that, I mean, it's a little strange for grown women to write on the sidewalk and sidewalk chalk anyway, but that this poor single woman who has been literally alone for the whole time in her apartment wouldn't be able to do it without asking a friend. And I all I could say to her was, I am so sorry that you've had this experience, and of course I'll write on the sidewalk with you. But we never,
Right.
I think that might be the main reason why we're here, because it's heartbreaking. I am going to say white privilege. My privilege allowed me never to think of this. Never to think of this. And I know it's a loaded term, but I also think perhaps part of white privilege is that people won't use that term because they don't want to, you know, because of building bridges for sure. But sometimes I think we need some things torn down in our lives.
Yeah, and Teresa, that's what I think of when I think of ignorance, is I think that, you know, we don't, as white people, to be honest, as a white person, I don't have to think of racism. I don't have to think of, you know, of my skin color being a detriment to me. And so when stuff like this happens, yeah, it shakes us to our core, because we don't think of it every day.
Yeah.
And we should, but we don't, because we're not in a situation where we have to, you know. And it really, this whole story just kind of, it tore us up pretty bad, you know.
So we would have said 3 weeks ago that our church does a great job with race relations, but today we don't feel like we can say that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You know, that's such a, it's so unfortunate. I go to a multiracial mega church here in Dallas, but occasionally we have discussions, and it is unfortunate. Let me put it this way, put it out there. What is I often find unfortunate is how, on discussing issues, it appears as though a lot of people, too many people at church, believe more in Congress than they believe in God.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay, but guys, we have it. You say, well, these poor people, okay, they are poor people and people who are having some issues, and you're like, well, no, why don't they work harder? And I'm like, okay,
wow.
But you also say the government is just giving, spoon-feeding people. I'm like, are you not realizing that the scripture, we are taught that the church should take care of the poor, the widows, we have dropped that ball. And as the government is trying to pick up that ball, we are trying to legislate against that in the church. I'm like, I mean, seriously, these are some of the things. I'm like, okay, maybe we may not realize it, but you know, God says we need to go the extra mile for the poor.
Yes.
And that's even when it comes to race relations. I often like to look at it this way: the majority, which not necessarily by skin color, since we're talking about racism, I'll apply it to that. Whoever is in the majority is better served if they act as a host. Imagine if somebody came to your house and you continued behaving like everything is normal, and then somebody's in your house. That person is not comfortable.
Yes.
To bring comfort to that person, you want to go the extra mile to know them, host them, and make them feel at home.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I think whether it's the church or it's the majority, whether it's on race, it's on ethnic grouping, economic groupings, whatever grouping, Christians and they're in a place where they're non-Christians, that's majority. We band together and we don't understand the other group and we want to act as hosts.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that is a very huge challenge, which on a national level can be seen as racism. it's not just, okay, racism. Look at the parties between the Democrats and the Republicans. I mean, if you talk about a split, I mean, there's also another split right there. Even people of the same skin color or whatever, once they are on different sides, it's almost as if they don't even want to hear what the other person is going to say. Yeah. And something may go wrong with the other person, they'll be less likely to do something. Mm-hmm. There was a to illustrate it, there was a little survey they did somewhere here in Dallas. They had somebody around, you know, Dallas is very big as a Cowboys, right? So they had somebody wear a jersey, I think it was New England or something. Oh. So the person, where there was a lot of people, they just had this person in a New England jersey, Patriots, I think it was, just fall to the ground and start, you know, crying for help. Mm. A number of people passed them by and they didn't do anything. Eventually, some did, you know, attend to the person. Then they did the same experiment. This person had a Cowboys jersey, fell to the ground. People, he could not have, people were rushing to help this person out. Mm. And so that is to say, I was like, well, okay, so we find division and act on it a lot more efficiently than we do things that keep us together.
Yes.
And God challenges us to do a different thing. Exercise compassion one to another. And we could do very well if the church were to start doing that as well, because and model racial harmony, model economic class harmony. You know, in some churches, when you're a giver, the pastor tends to talk about you a little more frequently and avoid your issues. Preferential seating, and you know, your child has a headache, you get a call of encouragement and maybe a prayer. Somebody's child has been hospitalized for 30 days because they're not known as a giver. I mean, these are things that are a situation of the heart. And I think this is such a big opportunity for the church to shine. But we'll see. It's still an opportunity.
My city, Kansas City, we've had, I mean, we got a lot of work to do, but the really cool thing that's happened here is the largest church in Kansas City is a Methodist church called Church of the Resurrection. The most influential Black church is also a Methodist church called St. James. There's been 3 generations of Emmanuel Cleavers who have pastored the church. The Emmanuel Cleaver II, the rep for the area. Those 2 churches came together and formed an organization I belong to called Allies for Racial Justice. And that's been a really good thing. So in our city, we have a very, very exclusive shopping area called the Plaza. And it was designed by a guy named J.C. Nichols. Well, J.C. Nichols was a racist. And what happened is he designed this whole thing to where you had this really exclusive white enclave, and then there was a street called Truth, and all the Black people had to live on the other side of it. And even in the contracts, if you were white and you sold your house, you couldn't sell it to a Black person. So we have a history, a racist history here. Well, this whole week, guess where all the marches have been? On the Plaza, right? They've been at this and it's been white and Black. It's been members of both communities. One of the things, I mean, I'll just share a pet peeve that I have, which is sort of interesting, because the evangelical side of the equation, you know, we get kind of, you know, we can get very condescending toward the Catholics. You know what I mean? It's like, you know how that goes, right? And, you know, and get this big theology bait. But the reality of it is the Catholic Church has been far more proactive in social issues down in the inner city than the evangelicals ever have. In fact, in the evangelical church, we'd rather put money in the plate and send it over so somebody in Africa can deal with poor people. We don't get involved. We don't get our hands dirty. And that's been a real problem for me. And it's one of these things that I'm really trying to get my friends to realize. It's like you'd rather pay somebody else to go try to solve your problem. And because of the fact that the way our cities are designed, we have such large African-American populations in the core, and then around it there's these exclusively white areas that the people just don't interact. All of our churches are segregated the same way. I happen to be one of 2 white people that live in my apartment, and it's a complete anomaly in my world. You know, I have all my friends scratching their heads going, I'm like, how do you do that? You know, and they'll come over and visit me, and it's like we walk through the place and everybody's high-fiving me, and we're doing, and they're all staring at me like, how are you doing that? And what they don't understand is I'm just normal. It's like they've got this thing in their head, like somehow or another to relate to this black person, I have to, you know what I mean? It's like all these weird ignorances in their head. And then when they realize, no, it's be yourself. Like,
but they're coming out of a different world.
I keep bringing up one word that is a passion for me is authenticity.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's, if we could get back to authenticity in our relationships with one another, we could make some serious headway in race relations.
I like looking at this scientifically because it both explains part of it and then also makes it ridiculous and hilarious. Because on one side of it, if you look from the scientific perspective of taking the argument seriously that it actually has to do with skin color or it actually has to do with genetics, like the idea that I have superior genetics when clearly you're better at not getting sunburn, which is the only difference skin color wise. And that's a genetic advantage. So clearly I'm not the genetic superior. But then if you look at it from the science of we're trained as humans to categorize, then you get into the good side of profiling that Mr. VK was talking about. And, you know, it has a bad connotation with profiling because that natural propensity of humans to categorize also makes it so that the humans who want to be lazy and just lump things over in a category that is comfortable for them very easily just take everything and push it over into a large category that contains something that they already have a neural pathway for. They already have a set of rules that you have to follow now because they've lumped you in there. And
I agree with you. There's a serious intellectual laziness. Humans
that's what it is. Yes. And it goes to what Aunt Teresa was saying, that she doesn't believe that they're ignorant. I don't know of a better word, though. I think what you might be saying is that you don't believe that they're naive, because naivete assumes an innocence, whereas ignorance can be willful.
Right. Exactly. You know, Mr. Wenger and Debbie and Mark, do you want to chime in? You know, Debbie and I, we grew up in the era of where Zimbabwe was just getting its independence. And the neighborhood in which we both lived in was predominantly white. We went to the same school that was pretty much forced during the transition to now include the Black people. They were not as many as they were during the early 80s when they were integrating the schools. So in our neighborhood, we had the Presbyterian Church, where Debbie and as parents were, I don't know if they were the main pastors, but I know that there were pastors there. They were also our pastors at the church, at school. And so we hung out with them from that perspective, those of us who were in the scripture union, who were in the choir. And I don't remember, even though I grew up in that era, I remember that as children, our transition was pretty smooth. In terms of, I don't recall being treated any different maybe because our headmaster became a Black right away, when we had that transition, I don't know. I don't remember feeling any kind of way, say, towards Debbie, and or her treating me, or thinking about her treating me any kind of different because of the color of my skin. I don't even know if it even like if we even thought about it when we were growing up in that era. Yes, my father was very political. My father spent several years in political detention, tortured by the white men, and my hatred for the white men was pretty much what my father taught me.
Yeah.
So, and then when you later on in life, as you get, and I think exposure plays a very big part. You know, when you are, most people who are not as well traveled, they kind of stay within their, to pick your terminology, lack of a better word, their ignorance, to stay within their, they choose to stay within that ignorance. And so when I was growing up, I remember not liking the white man, not because the white person had done anything to me. My friends I went to school, where most of them were white, and they had not done anything to me. They were my friends in the playground. We would play together. We would be in the choir or in the acting together. We would do things together. So, but my hatred for white people, even as an adult, was still stemmed from the fact that it was the white men that tortured my dad when he was in detention. So perhaps I am, to a certain extent, a racist in that regard, that I was racially saying I couldn't even think of the idea of marrying a white man or bringing a white man to my father, for instance. Ooh, I didn't even know if my father will still talk to me if I were to bring a white man as a possible person I am marrying, because of what my father had instilled in us. And then of course, then the government is also adding to that narrative. So, and yet here I am today. I love all people. I am pretty much a global person, and I still struggle. So that's why I struggle with the ignorance, because I think it's a choice. Because I have made the choice. So I don't know, Debbie, if your experience of us growing up was any different from what I just explained.
Sorry to not have the video on. We're having storms here, so our internet is iffy. So that's why I turned our picture off.
That's okay.
I would agree with a lot of what you said. When I was in high school, my four best friends, one was a white, two were Africans, and one was an Indian. And we got along really well. But I think there were things that we're just unaware of that, so I never thought, oh, I'm racist, or I notice people's skin, because my best friends were across the board, you know, from different groups. But I realized the depth of just the ingrained things that I take for granted when I watched the movie Black Panther. Because in that movie, there's African accents, and they are from characters who are intellectual and intelligent and wise, and that wasn't, it just hit me, because in my experience, whenever I heard an African sounding accent speaking English, it was not portrayed as a positive, as an intellectual accent. That was like the simple person accent. And I realized, oh my goodness, where did this come from? This is so insidious that if you had asked me, I wouldn't have known to think that. But when I heard in a movie
African accents and they were scientific and they were advanced, it was a dissonance in my ear that made me realize the lack of that in my life prior to that point.
Mm.
And so I think a lot of that's what we want to become more aware of, is these small things that are there that aren't the obvious, I don't know, they're not where our heart wants to be, but they're things that are just ingrained and hidden, and bringing those to light, I think, is what I'm hoping will be happening. And what I said wasn't misunderstood. I usually think very carefully before I speak, and this I just kind of answered off the top of my head.
That's okay. That's okay.
So,
this may surprise you, Teresa, but you know that 4% of only 4% of the Americans have ever been out of the country.
Mm.
Yeah.
So when I talk about ignorance, it's not even just a racial issue. It goes across a lot of other issues as well. I'm an anomaly in my culture because I'm a global person. I have traveled. I ran a record company for years. I've been all over the world. Most of the people in my world have never left the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fascinating to me, because I run into this all the time, is that Americans have no clue what's going on in most other places in the world.
Right.
And the question I always get all the time is, why do they hate us so much? I mean, Americans don't even know what their own government's done in their name. So things that in this group that we're all so aware of, and it's a default setting, and we're just like, hello, most Americans would have no clue about. So it's one of my friends in Zimbabwe said something once. He goes, what Americans don't understand is you guys sneeze and it's a tsunami over here. The Americans are oblivious to that. They can't, it's like they can't figure out why everybody's on the news watching America. Like, why are people in Paris, marching in the streets about some black guy that got killed in Minneapolis?
Yeah.
See, there's a disconnect, and it's funny how many people haven't traveled more than 50 miles from where they were born. So there's a ton of ignorance here, and it's getting better. One of the things I wrote about in my book is what's going on in the technology world, because it used to be that change could only happen over generations, and the reason is because information moves so slowly. What's happened with, you got to remember that it was only in 2002 or 2003 that Nokia developed a cell phone that could take a photograph. The iPhone came out in 2007. We're in a new world right now. That's what's changing everything. What happened in this case in Minneapolis was the cell phone. The cell phone changed everything. This whole thing has happened because of a cell phone.
That's right.
Right?
Everybody
so
becomes
are moving so fast right now.
Everybody becomes a potential journalist.
Yes.
But there's not secrets anymore. I mean, it's just we're in a world where everybody's living in glass houses. I just did a program I did the other day, and I said, we live in a narcissistic world right now where, because of social media, we're the lead news story in our own universe every day.
Yeah.
I just want to take a quick minute to acknowledge my in-law who just came in. That's James' mom. Hey, Miss Janet. You are muted. Unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
You're on mute, Mom.
Leave her alone.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm just trying to tell you, it's very hard for foreigners and minorities to understand how ignorant white people are.
Hey, Miss Janet, I see you are unmuted. How are you?
Thank you for welcoming me in. I'm sorry I'm late. I had a board meeting for our church.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. You came right on time. We are talking about what is going on within our churches in relation to race, whether or not our churches are doing all that they should be doing to be to be in the middle of, or to be the leaders of resolving these racial issues that are across the board. Now, earlier, Bob, I believe you started talking about how the Roman Catholic is doing ABC. My question then becomes, if as different denominations, with all the different denominations that we have here in the world, across the world, if we already have these different differences and we already kind of view each other as, with the Pentecostals, we think we have the truth. And then the Roman Catholic come in and say, we have been in existence before you were born. And, you know, we all have something that we think we have, we are the lead on. And we don't agree, or even though we are reading the same Bible, we don't seem to agree even on the revelation of everything that is in the Bible. And even within the Pentecostal, there are still some that are more major than others. So if we have those fundamental differences, how then can the church, as the body of Christ, regardless of what your belief system is, but as the church is defined by the Bible as the body of Christ, how then can we solve major issues like race and injustice?
I think just to take a bite on that, I think one of the things is we just need to realize that we are different parts of the body. I think one of the traps that we too frequently run into or fall into is the idea of being the same. If I'm doing this, this is the right way to do it. And if somebody else comes with a different idea, they are threatening me, or they don't understand the scripture. Now, Paul and Peter did have varying some differences, but I don't think the Bible fell apart because of those differences. Now, here's the thing. I think we can learn a thing or two from that. It is possible to have differing revelations on the how to do something. Now, the truth is the same, but how to. For instance, you know, you can reach people by phone, by Zoom. You can reach people by going there. You can reach people by having them come over. So there could be different ways of doing things. And it is okay. I don't think it's an area of competition, which we often tend to fall into that and forget the scripture that teaches us that we should not conform to the world. The world is about competition. You know, they always said it has to be a first and others are losing and so forth. But in the kingdom of God, says you have your role, you've got your race, if we all do our races, it's all for the greater good of the kingdom. So even in the area of race, I think sometimes the church, as I hear sometimes interacting over here, there is this idea that you need to come up with a formula that is going to kind of slice through all the issues to get to the main issue. And yet, I think Jesus showed us, be compassionate. We need to be compassionate and be about serving. Yeah. Too often we like to be served. We're the church. I often joke with my Christian friends and say, well, you know, the scripture, Jesus didn't say, come therefore to my church. He said we should go therefore. So a lot of the issues sometimes is we're focusing on us, and God wants us to focus on others. Yeah. And as we focus on others, he says he will make all things work together for good. We seek him first. We know the scripture. But in practice, I think in practice, we quickly all too quickly to conforming to the world.
Yeah.
Which is full of a lot of division. And as we know, the world says if you're going to rule, one of the, you divide and rule. That's one of a tried and tested way of at least getting some rulership in the way, in the system of the world. You divide, you partition people here and there, you've got a better chance of ruling them for some time. But God says the mission of God is not like that. So I think even in the issue of race relations, we want to engage. Let me throw this example. When I first came to this country, it was very fascinating. I went to a car dealership. I sold cars. Now, as you can imagine, some of you who have bought cars, you see a lot of people. So I interacted with a lot of people. And the questions that people would be asking, to the point of people being ignorant, if we want to use that term, it really surprised me. The perception I had of America before I came to the US, and then interacting with people, it was really a cultural shock for me. I live in Dallas, about 45 minutes from Dallas. A lot of people had not been to Dallas. I'm like, you've not been to Dallas? I've come across the continent, I mean, come across the ocean. Why can't you go to Dallas? Oh, no, I mean, it's a big city. It is. And I'm like, okay, really? And some people would come across and say, hey, don't touch me. You know, you're trying to welcome somebody and they say, hey, don't touch me. Oh, okay. And, but on further engagement, 4 hours later, I've sold them a car. We are hugging and high-fiving and taking pictures and talking about the referral. I found it that, for me, I found that very fascinating that somebody will say, don't touch me. And it will be different races. Different races, don't touch me. But 4 hours later, we've shared a lot of stories and they're referring family. And I'm like, wow. You know, at least even though we may talk about ignorance, but you know what? When we engage, we've got an opportunity to change it. We've got an opportunity to change because the other person is scared. In my Ndebele language, there's a saying, I'll say it in Ndebele and then translate it. It says, Abantu besaba umnyama ongelambisi. Basically, it says people are just scared of the darkness because they think there are bears out there, but there are no bears. But people are just scared because it looks dark out there. There may be bears, so let me not venture out. So that I found that to hold very true, that people are scared of the unknown. And so one of the ways to change things is to change the knowledge. What somebody does with it is up to them. But if we commit to that, we learn, they learn, we're all better for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I found interesting, and again, I'm trying not to be too hard here, but you know, so not only is there intellectual laziness, but particularly in the Christian community, there's relational laziness.
Yes.
And here's why. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but we come from a culture where at the top of our value system is efficiency. And things are all solved by institutions, right? Well, in order to have an institution, you need the way institutions work. There's a few people at the top that have to control a whole bunch of people down below. Well, in order to do that efficiently and do it without a lot of effort, it's easier if they're all uniform and they all conform, right? Like we're all alike. It's more, you know, if we're all alike, it's more efficient. And whatever. So what's ended up happening in American culture is just easier. It's less tension, right? But here's where I go at it is there's one fundamental truth that hasn't really been brought to the fore, and that's this: is there's strength in diversity. See,
exactly.
We're fighting against a cultural mentality that uniformity, conformity are a better way to go. I mean, if you go into science, if you ask a scientist, a biologist, to tell you about which species have survived you know, over the last millions of years, what they'll tell you is all the ones that have the most diverse DNA.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a fundamental creative truth. God put that into the DNA of nature, that diversity of strength, but it's not seen. It's not talked about, you know, right? And so because of the fact we don't talk about it, we don't actually see it. We don't invest the necessary efforts to get there, because we've all been taught that it's so much easier if we're all think alike. So that's why we got 30,000 denominations, you know, why we all congregate with our own races. I mean, so there's so many layers of, you know, and it's just easier. And so we're lazy. And so we've got to somehow or another come back, you know, to realizing, at least within the Christian community, you know, it's what Paul talked about in Ephesians. He said it was intent that through the church, the manifold wisdom of God would be revealed, right? Well, the word manifold means many faceted, diverse. But somehow or another, we're not grasping that it's a strength for us to be together when we're different. We're lazy.
That's right.
We're complicated.
You're fighting against, like, well, here in this country, you're fighting against 400 years of being trained one way.
Yeah.
You know, of being split apart like that. And then not only that, but we started 400 years ago with it, but people that came here had it for thousands of years, you know, before that. So, you know, I think the one thing that I'm realizing more than ever is that this is a problem that it's not going to be quickly fixed.
Yes.
And which is really tough for people in today's world, because we want things quickly fixed, because we are based on efficiency. We want it done. Move on to the next thing, that we're done with that.
That's right.
And you know, but it's not something that's going to be that way. We're going to have
the relationships are not like that.
No, they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
We have to keep talking about this, and we have to keep talking with. We mentioned earlier about talking with white people, white to white, black to black, white to black, young to old, and old to young, and passing it down to the next generations, and you know, realizing that in my lifetime, it's most likely possible that this problem is not going to be fixed. But maybe with my kids, my grandkids, that would be wonderful. You know?
We all got to actively engage to make that happen. And with that in mind, I don't want my dad to get away with not being introduced. He's the dog.
Hi, doggy.
He's not the dog.
Oh,
He has a picture of a dog.
Hello, I'm the dad. I'm not talking because I'm not talking much, and there's no video because you can't see my face. I'm in a car. I'm going right now. There's a memorial at the 9/11 memorial in Yardley, Pennsylvania, and it's a car-based thing, and it took place at 7, but the line of cars has been for hours and hours of people just beeping and saying Black Lives Matter, and some wonderful things are happening here. But that's why also there's a lot of horns beeping. So I'm loving what you guys are saying, but I don't want you to be distracted by all the horns.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kelly.
Thank
Good
you.
to hear your voice after a while.
You know,
please
nature's
stay
going to
out
solve
there.
this. Nature's going to solve this racial problem. No, it's true, and let me explain why. Before the Civil War, there was two brothers from your part of the woods, Teresa, called Edward and Lewis Tappan. And Lewis Tappan was one of the fathers of the abolitionist movement in America. And he made a prediction back before 1860 that there was a day coming when all Americans would be copper colored. What's happening is 2 years ago in America, there were actually more interracial marriages than intra-racial marriages. So, I mean, I don't want to get too graphic here, but sex is going to solve the problem. and another 3 or 4 or 5 generations, and we're just all going to be beige. And the whole issue, all these little distinctions that we all have, that we all label ourselves because of our skin color, are all disappearing.
Right.
So it's kind of funny because we're having this conversation, but my great-grandchildren aren't going to be struggling with this.
Speaking of grandchildren, mine just have kind of appeared. I can only see, who is that? Is that Eli?
No, this is Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Say hi to everybody. We got Aunt Teresa, we got Nana and Papa, cousin Taylor.
Hi, Alex.
How are you? Good. So my next question, I because I don't want I'll be remiss if I don't ask this specific question specifically to the parents, the young parents, James and Melissa. What are your concerns concerning your children in this era, in this environment, raising young kids in this environment? Talk to me about those fears, because they do say once you have one drop of blood, you are black. So they are viewed as black from as far as the world is concerned. Is that a concern to you? What is going on, and how do you propose to build a better environment for your children? And if you have grandkids, please, by all means, talk to me about that. You're absolutely right, Bob. Sex might be the one that resolves this one. But I want to hear also from the young parents, what are their views and what are some of the concerns that they have? Or do you not have any concerns?
I personally think that it's a cop-out when people say you have one drop of blackness in you, that means that you're black. And I guess, I just feel like it's a cop-out for people to feel like they can be racist, because at the end of the day, when you look at his DNA, he's still half white, even though he might look closer to my complexion or whatnot. And it's very interesting because Alex, who's just here, looks more like, if you see him, he looks more like a typically mixed kid. And then we have Eli, who's more closer to white from the hair, whatever features and things like that. So it's pretty interesting that sometimes when people, what I've noticed, especially because it's like, I think that a lot of times we talk about racism with, you know, white people, but with Black people, I've seen people show more of a preference to Eli, my youngest, who looks more white, than Alex, who looks closer to being Black. And to me, I think it's just disturbing, because I want them to be able to identify with both groups. And, you know, I know because of the way society is, it might not be that way, but hopefully, because a lot of people are now mixing, that we'll all be seen as like we're equal. And I think my main concern is that they don't see, I mean, they know what color we are, but they don't identify some of the negative things that are attached to each color. So they might grow up a bit confused as to why, you know, one group are not like them, or why they can't necessarily fit in with just one group or both groups. So it's very alarming and also scary, because when I think about what's going on, how can I tell my kids what's going on with all the racial stuff without them hating white people? Because they are half white as well.
Right, yeah.
You know, something I found fascinating is the one drop rule traditionally was a racist thing from white people, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You know who flipped that?
Yeah.
Barack Obama.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what was, and Morgan Freeman was the one that pointed it out, because for years it was, if you have one drop, you know, one drop, you're black. Well, then everybody claimed Barack Obama as being black. And Morgan Freeman came out and said, wait a minute, why is he black? Yeah, and all the black community said he's ours. And so there's these topics are really, it's interesting where this is all going, because again, it's like, well, why are we even having this? Well, who made the rule? You see what I mean? It's these things, and all these classifications are all government related.
Exactly.
Right? It's all about the few at the top controlling the many at the bottom. And in order to do that, we got to classify everyone.
Yes.
Well, that's getting all messed
Melissa,
up now.
Yeah, Melissa, when I was thinking about you earlier, and what I was anticipating you bringing to the table, one of my concerns was, I don't know if any of you have read, oh gosh, Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. And I couldn't help but think what one of the scenarios that he talks about in there, where he was with his mother, and every time his mother sees a policeman, a white policeman, she would let go of his hand, which she would have been holding. Or when they are in the park, she would not necessarily announce it, but act like she was the maid, or people would assume that she is the maid, and she would not correct them. And so I was just thinking about in relation to now, where I was thinking, what if my daughter, and I was thinking of Melissa, what if my daughter gets met by an overzealous policeman when she has her kids in the back, and he assumes something, and that thing kind of really just hit me. And then I have a 7-year-old boy from my firstborn, and I worry about the environment in which he is growing up. So I want to ask Dr. Francis Mpindu, who happens to be also a policeman and a police chaplain. What do I tell my children? Now, what I have been teaching them is, be polite when you get stopped, don't make any quick moves, say yes sir, yes ma'am, and just follow their instruction. But it doesn't seem like that is enough to keep them alive with all these trigger happy type of police people. So my question to you, Mr. Mpindu, is what role does community policing play in race and other social constructs, such as justice and, like we just talked about, class issues?
Wow.
Feel free to write a thesis.
As you know, I just published a book. It's called Community Policing: The Path to Healthier Relationships. And in that book, I chose the perspective of a chaplain, because as a chaplain, you ride with the police, you have access to police events, functions, meetings, everything. And you also interact with the community in ways that, you have this dual role. And so when you ask a question like that, it really pains my heart that one of the things I have discovered is many of our police officers are not friendly. Oftentimes when I go to different police jurisdictions, when they don't know who I am, when I see a police officer, by the way, my sister, Pastor T, she said a policeman. So we have to stay away from male, female, and say police officer.
Okay.
So when you see a police officer, and you say hello to them, sometimes they give you the look or they just ignore you. And then once I introduce who I am, the conversation changes. They're like, oh, really? Oh, that's nice. Well, it's good to see you. So what brings you into our community? And I'm saying to myself, shouldn't that be the mindset of police officers when they go about doing their work? Because in North America, Canada and the US, police officers are there to police with the community. They don't police the community as we find in other parts of the world. You see, in Zimbabwe, they police the community. They don't need to talk to you. They come in to do what they need to do. But in North America, there's this idea of policing with the community. So if you're going to police with the community, the police must be viewed as resources. They must be viewed as friends. People will reach out to. I mean, how many of us have had police officers walk down your street just saying hi to people without looking for trouble? Probably not. And yet, when the police come to your house, people begin to wonder, I think there's trouble there, because we always associate their visits with trouble. Yeah. And we have to change that. One of the things I discovered a few years ago, I went to Atlanta. And while I was in Atlanta, I actually learned that policing in the United States was introduced. The concept of policing, they were actually using horses, so they would patrol. The police were introduced to capture runaway slaves. So if ever you wonder sometimes why there's this mindset that when they see a black guy, they see him as a threat. He has to be whipped into shape. He has to be subdued because he could kill me. Because that's the kind of training. And in my second book, which I've already started writing, which has to do with changing the police culture, where we're saying we need more people of color to be senior instructors in our police academies, so that they can bring this element that is so, displayed by, is it Melissa and James? Displayed by Bob and his wife, that there are intercultural relationships that should surpass how we treat other people. And so one of the things you find is police officers and police organizations, I don't know what it is like in the US, but in Canada, there is a police services board which works with the chief. They don't supervise the chief, but they help in terms of bringing awareness to the chief in terms of what's happening in the community and what needs to be focused on. And what happens is in Canada, and this is what I've observed, and I've written this in my book, many of these police services boards, they are predominantly white. Mm-hmm. Because the process of getting into the police services board with these policies and bureaucracies and all these hoops that you have to go through, it's easier for white people to get into. And many of us as blacks, we tell our kids to stay away from policing as a career. It's like, don't you have anything else to do? You want to be a police? What? And so we push our children and our young people away from being part of the structure that can actually bring changes in the community. So let me say this. There are bad police officers, just there are bad teachers and bad drivers. And there are good police officers, just as we have good different people, like professors and so forth. Unfortunately, one of the things that is so real is the bad apples that really mess up everything else. Policing is such an honorable career. I mean, they are there to serve and protect, but unfortunately, how do you say hello to an officer who just killed somebody you love, like George Floyd? How do you say hello to an officer who just shot somebody? How do families heal? So I was very delighted when I saw the theme of tonight. And I know that Pastor Teresa, you see this as, we're getting the dialogue started and we will have other aspects and so forth. One of the things that we need to be aware of is healthy relationships don't just happen.
Mm-hmm.
In alternative dispute and conflict resolution, usually we say that if there's a conflict between two parties, both parties have contributed. And I'm sure Bob would be, he would have some idea of where I'm going with this. The community has done things to police officers that has made police officers do some things that raises the eyebrow. The police has done certain things to people in the community that causes the community to raise eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is not going to come by attacking these people. And this is what makes my book unique. I'm inviting them into a dialogue. And I think most of you, I was very pleased, I was listening in. Most of you are talking about relationships. Answers are going to come from relationships. We need to build relationships. But unfortunately, without the right information, because of what Bob said, that we have perspectives based on where we grew up and what we've been exposed to, we have limited understanding of our world and limited understanding of information. So usually we all start from sharing our conclusions. We're not talking about the processes that led to those conclusions.
Mm.
So I don't like the police, period. So when I see them, I run away, even though you haven't done anything wrong. In policing, that is called questionable behavior. When they see you running, you're attracting attention to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when they stop you, sure, we tell our kids, Pastor Teresa, that when you are driving and you're pulled over by the police, the conversation you have with your grandson afterwards will either build a relationship with the police or it will destroy possible relationships with the police. It's what happens afterwards. What are we saying to our kids about the police? And most of those formative years are very, very key to the relationships that happen in the community. So this is why we are focusing on learning conversations. We need to create learning conversations. And for that to happen, we have to be intentional. We have to have the skills. Most of our police officers, actually, they don't even have alternative dispute and conflict resolution skills at all. This is why they resort to the use of the gun. You see, in North America, unlike Zimbabwe and other parts of Africa, you can use the gun to threaten someone. You shoot in the air and say, stop. In North America, you don't do that. When you draw the gun, you're going to use it. It's not a toy. You don't say, well, listen, you see what I have here? Don't play with me. No, you don't do that. When you draw it, most likely you're going to use it. And they don't even shoot to disarm. They shoot to kill. And you say to yourself, but the guy was so far away from you. Why didn't you shoot his hand so that you distract him? And then, no, they shoot to kill. So that's the kind of training that they receive. And so one of the things I talk about in my book is the power of the internal voice. You remember earlier, Pastor Teresa was saying, oh, you seem to be the only privileged one who is talking to yourself out loud and we're all listening in. Well, the truth of the matter is we all speak to ourselves, and police officers do that. You see, there's a fine line between a hero and a zero. An officer can decide in a split second that I felt threatened and so I shot them because they are responding to that internal voice. So what we're saying is you need not be the only voice you listen to. There are many other voices you should listen to. Don't fight the internal voice. Dialogue, inform, question things, and interact with other people before you make decisions. You saw what happened with George Floyd. There's an officer right there with his knee on his neck. And you have other officers watching the same thing, actually hearing him groaning, but they didn't do anything. They didn't stop him. And part of the problem with police culture is when things like that happen, they close ranks. They keep their mouths shut because they're trying to protect themselves. every time, I'm actually going to put up an article tonight on my LinkedIn. I have about 3,000 followers, part of mostly police officers. And I'm going to put the picture of the police officers in Miami who knelt down with the protesters, and the protesters came and they knelt with them. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, when police officers show humanity, people get it. You see, the uniform does not define a police officer. Our police officers need to learn to put humanity behind that uniform so that people see that they are real people. They have a heart, they care. But we can't do that when we do stuff that makes everybody think that, you know, police, we need to get rid of police. We don't need police.
Yeah.
So, Pastor Teresa, I don't have all night. I'm sure some of you would like to comment, but I just thought I need to bring those things to your attention. We need to build healthier relationships, and it's not going to happen overnight. We have to be intentional. And I think the kinds of stuff that Bob does, the kinds of stuff that my little brother VK does, the kind of stuff that, you know, Melissa and James and everybody else is into, and Pastor T, we need to build relationships that make our communities have healthier and safer environments between the community and the police. And it's going to take work. Let me keep my mouth shut.
Well, no, thank you for that very profound response to my loaded question. And I am sure there is more to be said within this question and others concerning racial issues in America and worldwide. Thank you so much for that, Pastor. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, is every household that is represented here going to receive a signed copy from you in exchange to what, $15?
That is correct. Send the $15 to Pastor Teresa, and I will put the book in the mail. Just give her your address, and one of you will get a copy of that. I'll put that in the mail. There's still mail between Canada and the US.
Although I think Bob can be excused from sending the $15. He can just send his copy of his book to you, and then you trade.
Bob is the only one who has to pay me in bond notes.
Oh, bond notes.
Oh my goodness!
I have a $100 trillion note. Is that enough?
Let's stop.
Bob, seriously, if you have some of those weird notes, I'm looking for them. My friends who are bothering me, so you could send them to me.
Oh, the notes, Anima Daga.
Anima Daga, exactly.
That's right.
Oh, we can go all night on this conversation and on this dialogue, but we all know that we have other things to take care of.
That's right.
This is really, really important for this dialogue to continue. I am hoping to host this at least every other week, if not every week. As long as I can get some willing participants, I would love to be able to continue having this dialogue, because I don't think, like everyone else agrees, it does not take just one dialogue. It's going to take dialogues in different settings with different people, like Bob was saying, white to white, black to black, and crossover, and just have a dialogue with your network. If you don't know where to start posting this, I'm going to put this on YouTube and put a link on my Facebook page so you can share with others. Start with that. Send it to them. Tag them and say, "Hey, listen to this. I was so cool. I was on TV. I did this." So maybe that's a way to start the conversation with some people that you may not be sure how they may receive this. So, but you have to start somewhere. I think one of the things that is stated by Melody and also by Mark and Debbie is that sometimes people feel helpless. Like, what do we do? You come in with assumptions that, like Melody was saying, she assumed that everyone was going to use that chalk and do what they need to do on their sidewalk. And yet one individual didn't feel safe or didn't feel empowered enough to safely do that in front of her own house. So these conversations have to happen. They have to happen within the church. So I want to hear from you before we leave on from this conversation. First, if there's anyone who would like to say their last words, and then I am going to give each of us some homework after that. So please, let's go one by one. If you have something you want to say, and if you don't want to say anything, don't keep us hanging. Just say, you know what, no, I've said enough for the day, and just keep it moving. Because otherwise we wait and think you are gonna come in. So if you're not going to say anything, by all means say, you know what, thank you. I'm going to refrain from saying anything for now. And then if you're going to say something, please, by all means, do give us your final words in this session of the first dialogue on racism in the United States.
Well, I'm not sure I want to say my last words. Sounds like last rites.
No, that's why I said in this session.
I've actually enjoyed this. I'm always enjoying meeting new people, hearing fresh perspectives, and I appreciate all of you and your contributions. I have really enjoyed the interaction.
Praise God.
Yeah, and it's been such a I grew up, my parents were teachers, so I like to say I am a teacher, but more importantly, I'm a student. So I like to learn, so I can teach, rather than teach, and so I can tell. Now, having said that, I think one of the things is let's embrace the idea of rejecting being driven by fear.
Yeah.
Because one of the core things in all this ism, racism, ethnic, or what, there is some element of fear.
That's right.
And then we tend to act it out in different ways, normally to the disadvantage of somebody else, at least on the onset. So and also it helps us get out of our comfort zone. Sometimes fear keeps us in our comfort zone, and then we reject everything else. Now, I look at the demonstrators these days. There's a lot of young people, and I think to myself, I'm like, okay, these demonstrators, in a lot of cases, are standing toe to toe right next to the police officers. The very police officers that at some stage you could say, well, these are the people we're scared of. But these young people are seeing a different identity in themselves.
Yeah.
We can actually stand with the cops and challenge them to behave better toward us. And we're not going to run scared, but we're going to get engaged so that we can have this dialogue. Now, all these sessions where we see some kneeling together and we're seeing some police chiefs walking with the demonstrators and also, that's in itself is also a dialogue. That's also coming out of people saying we are rejecting being defined or guided by fear. Now, the police chief, you better believe it, there's an element of fear in them that this crowd can turn on me and I can be in the news for having been harmed. But that chief has to overcome his fear, his comfort zone, and get to mingle with the crowd. Just like the crowd has to overcome their fear and get to meet with the police chief with the police officers and say, no, what you're doing is not working out for us. Let's talk. Why are you doing this? Let's do something together, like even this walking together, marching together. I think one chief said, let's make this into a, what term did they use? Not a demonstration, I'll remember what, he used the term, what's basically saying, we are in this together.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that's
what we need.
That's what we need. And also even parents, as brothers and sisters, I think we also need to lead again without fear. Not to say there is no fear, but to overcome the fear and do the things that are going to be. Because if I start saying to my kids, I'm scared of cops, guess what? I'm trying to transfer the idea that it is correct to be scared of
That's actually indirect discipleship.
Exactly, because everything else, I'm telling my kids, listen to what I'm saying. You better go to school. It's the right thing for you. So then if I get led by fear and I articulate that about police officer or about authority in general, because it's not just police officers, it's schools too. We have parents who demean authority in front of their kids.
That's right.
All those things as parents, we need to be very aware and present to understand the greater influence that we have on the people around us, and realize that let's not be led by fear, because we see what fear does. It doesn't produce the things that we like. So let's reject it by doing things even while we're scared, doing the right thing. I'll say this to conclude this. My speech is to say this. Jesus gave us an example in the garden. When he knew that the crucifixion was imminent, he said, may the cup pass. It was tough. Now, I'm not going to say that Christ was scared, but as a human being, if I were in that position, I would be scared. And he's saying, even when you're scared,
yes,
do the right thing.
Yeah.
Amen.
And somebody starts shaving off somebody's ear, cutting somebody's ear, do the right thing. If you have the power to put it back, go ahead and put it back.
Yes.
And that's the sort of thing that will start to change a lot of things, and will change the family at a time. In churches, we'll change it, a disciple at a time, discipling at a time. And I think then somebody talked about the humility or sincerity, authenticity.
Yes, authenticity.
We, in conflict resolution, we also say that when you're coming to resolve a conflict, you have to have the right posture.
That's right.
Correct intention for something. You don't. If you're not coming with that correct intention, you're not going to resolve anything for the greater good. So it is incumbent upon all of us to engage without fear or in spite of fear.
Yes, in spite of
compassion.
Yes.
I'll put in my last words.
Go ahead.
I guess the first thing I'm actually impressed is that the Black people on here are actually outnumbered by white people. So I feel like, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think, it feels good that people are actually trying to learn and are interested in hearing some of our experiences. And then I'll go back to what Mr. VK said about, I guess, us millennials and other, Generation Z? Not having that fear. I'll share, I believe it was was it 3 or 4 years ago when Alex was a baby, and we're driving in a predominantly white area that I had visited growing up many times. And at the time, I think Alex was like really, really fussy, and I had, you know, anyone who's had a newborn kind of knows when you've had those moments where you're like, no, enough is enough. So instead of James driving, I decided to drive. And that day I was just dressed, I guess what our generation would call bummy, and I was wearing like a hood and everything. And I'm pretty aware of when I'm speeding or not. I'll be completely honest. And this time I wasn't speeding. Like, I didn't even see where this cop came from, but he literally
That's how we
came
do it.
Okay. But he stopped me and said I was speeding, and I knew I wasn't speeding. Like, I have a newborn in the car, so I know for a fact that I wasn't speeding. But later on, after the interaction with him, and I called him out, and I told him that, you know, you profiled me, and he was pretty upset at some of the things, and I said some things that I'm probably not.
They tell that you were black, ma'am, as you were driving?
I believe so. And I was also wearing a hoodie. So I think that they thought I was a guy, because if you saw the guy's face when he came to talk to me, he was shocked when he realized that I was actually not a man. So I think he thought I was a black man in a hoodie. And I was pretty proud of myself. I stood up to him, and like, in retrospect, I'm like, wow, I probably could have been killed, because I really got into it with him, because I guess I didn't grow up with that fear of police that, you know, we pay taxes and everything. They're supposed to serve us. And I think that's the conversation that I've had with a lot of people in my generation. I don't drive past a cop in fear. I think more so I fear of how I am going to react if they try to profile me. And not that I fear that this cop is going to do something. I just fear of my reaction. Like, I might escalate the situation because I'm not somebody who stands for oppression, or if someone says something to me that's racist or whatever. I think it took James a while to get used to it, because I would call people out, or if I go in a store and someone starts following me, I'll ask them, like, you know, can I help them? Why are they following me?
Right.
And I think that's the change, that having those characteristics are good things for our generation, because a lot of times I feel like the older generation, they have this fear, and they're rightfully so. Like, if you live through the, I guess, 60s, when they say the civil rights movements were going on, I think people saw horrific things that, you know, they tell their kids, like, do this, do that. But there've been people who've been killed after following these so-called rules that you're supposed to talk to a police officer this way or that way. And I think now that with technology and, you know, people knowing their rights, it might make it a little difficult, or hopefully for police to think twice before they start doing stuff. Because especially now with the riots, if some people have been watching the news, a lot of police officers have been getting terminated because there was video evidence of some of the things that they're doing, abusing their right. And we should not be afraid of police. We should be able to walk up to a police officer. Like, it's disheartening, because like, my kids, when they see police or firemen, they're so excited, like, oh, they're gonna get the bad guy. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, if only my kids knew that these police probably view them as they're the bad guy.
Yeah.
That those police are coming to get people like them, or people like their mom that could be stopped, like you said. And, you know, someone posted something like she was teaching her 6-year-old daughter to record stuff on her phone if she ever got stopped by police. And I'm like, is that something that I want to teach my 4-year-old son, to be able to record if I got into an altercation with a police officer, which shouldn't be an altercation.
That's true.
I don't know. I just feel like this is a start, and it's a conversation that everybody's going to have. And, you know, it's nice now seeing also companies terminating people when they feel like they can go online and say disparaging things and think that they can get away with it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. A question for you, Melissa, being someone who was born outside of this country and versus someone who was born here, as volatile and as challenging as it was growing up in Zimbabwe, we never had that fear of a policeman stopping us.
Not at all.
You know, we didn't have that. So perhaps could your calling the policeman out having something that is ingrained, so your response to it is a little different from someone who was born here and has experienced the way police harass their grandmother and then their mother and then their uncle. And so for them, their approach might be a little bit different.
I think that definitely plays a part, and I will admit that I feel like I am like privileged because I didn't grow up in those neighborhoods that people would, you know, call supposedly the ghetto, inner city or whatever. I grew up in pretty much what you would call suburbs. So maybe I am a bit biased, and you know, that's something that
You are very biased, ma'am.
Yes, I'll admit it because it's not something that's a point that I've never thought. Like, you know, maybe because they've had their parents harassed and things like that, that they might look at things differently than I do. And I'm not afraid to speak up because I know that if right now something happened to me, I can call a lawyer. And like I did when I had that ticket with the officer, I called a lawyer and it went away. So
by the way, I was just going to say that it's a good bias. We are all biased. It's what we do with the bias that makes a difference. We all have a way of looking at things. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but it's how we handle the given situation that will either our bias becomes a negative or works toward the negative, or it can work toward the positive. So I was just being facetious. Otherwise, very well done, madam.
Yeah. The reason why I was asking you that is because earlier this afternoon I was in another discussion like this, mostly African American women, all of them African American women except for me is in African. And so I was sharing some of the experiences that I had, and someone where in working at work, someone would say something unkind regarding an African American coworker, and as a white person, and somehow have an expectation of me supporting them in that unkind commentary. And I would say, no, that's not nice. You cannot do that. That's not nice. And then they'll turn around and say, oh, no, not you. Not you. You are different. And as if to compliment me, as if I should feel like it's a compliment to me that, okay, I am a different type of Black person. You know, and every time I go back with, no, these are my people, and you cannot talk to them, you cannot talk about them in that way, especially in my presence. And some of them kind of got shocked, like, why would you say something like that? You are not from here. You're African. And so there is, you know, someone was describing it as, you know, like even sometimes the reason why those particular white people felt comfortable to say such a statement is because there are some Africans who are okay with that statement.
That's right.
So because they had said it before and they got away with it, or someone didn't call them up on it, they thought it was okay. So they continued the behavior. So it does take each and every one of us to call out and to take your words, Melissa. It does take some of us to call out someone when they are doing something, whether they are of the same color as us or not. We even get, and unfortunately, we had invited some African Americans to come into this dialogue, because sometimes, even as African Americans, and that's like, as African Americans, they look at us from Africa as we have come to take their jobs. And I've heard this several times. You are here to take what's ours, as if there is some quarter that is designated for the Black people and or for the African American community, and we are coming here to disrupt that quarter. And it's always kind of boggles my mind. And, you know, someone was teaching me today about horizontal oppression. And so I was thinking, okay, we want to talk about that later. Let me read more on it. But you reminded me of that, Melissa, when you were speaking. Please, Mr. James, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to take a moment to address some of the things that I missed throughout, like talking about Mr. Scott said that millennials don't seem to have fear. And I can really only speak for me and maybe the experience that I've had with my friends, but I think me and my friends just respond differently to fear. I was always very against authority figures as a kid. So when I had several different instances in which I was in run-ins with cops, I would stand up for myself, and sometimes it was not in the most polite way. Sometimes I would kind of pop off. And so I'll tell you right now, I was terrified in that moment. And she said that, oh, it took, you know, James a little bit of time to get used to, you know, the way I am, that I stand up for myself. It wasn't that it took me a while to respect that she did that, or it took me a while to, you know, love that she did that, because that's what I'm attracted to. It took me a while to stop just like freaking out because I was terrified for her life. And now I'm more terrified than I've ever been about my kids, because they have my genetics, and you already heard what she's like. And I just, you know, I wouldn't have gotten away with what I got away with if my skin didn't look the way it did. Based on what I've seen. And it's just, so my response to that, just like her response, the response I have to fear is to try to immediately do everything that I can to make whatever is causing that fear go away. You know, that's to confront it directly, and I don't think that's a negative way to attack fear. You heard Melissa say that they get so excited when they see cops, and that's something that I encourage. And because the only choice is for them to be friendly with cops, because if they had thought of cops as the enemy, they would fight, because they're fighters. They're born fighters. They have the genetics of fighters. So if they don't think that the cops are their friends, it's going to be a problem.
That's right.
I mean, but they shouldn't have to think that the cops are their friends or whatever. Like I said before, the cops are here to serve us, and they should not be. They should be like anybody else. It should just be a two-way street of respect. Like if I see someone walking by, we, you know, whether they're neighbors or not, or even in the store, we just smile at each other and go about our day. There shouldn't be that aspect of, oh, they need to see them this way. They should see them as an individual. It's a person, not based off of what uniform that person is wearing.
Point of correction, ma'am. Point of correction, ma'am. How many people run in the direction of danger to protect other people the way cops do, other than the firemen or the firefighters?
And pastors, throw in some pastors in there for good measure.
I think that for the most part, most people will, if it's somebody that's related to them. Like no parent is gonna let like their kid in a, I mean, aside from crazy ones, but if a building is burning or whatever, most people would jump into that situation. Or if something bad, like at least I like to think that most people would. So I'm not trying to dismiss cops, but I'm just saying that.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
It should not be a place where they have to feel like they have to act a certain way because this person is the police.
Yep.
It should be where they should see that person as an individual, not the uniform they're wearing.
Point well taken.
As a sociologist, I'm fascinated by this discussion because us boomers actually think you millennials have generational privilege.
Hello.
And the reason is we were raised completely differently. See, you guys got raised that you were the center of the universe, so nobody damn talk to you like that, right? All of us grew up in a world Boy, we were scared of Catholic nuns. We were scared of our teachers. And by God, if the police showed up,
and scared of the pastor,
I mean,
and scared of the pastor.
I'm telling you, it's a different world. So the whole idea of fearing authority figures was drilled into us from, you know, and you guys all grew up being told that the authority figures were all there to wait on you and serve you and make sure you were safe and felt
And then
happy.
they go to school, Bob. They go to school, and then their teacher, who happens to be Teresa, they're like, "Hi, Teresa," and Teresa is okay with that. And we are like, "No, no, 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 that's not Teresa. That's Miss T."
Right. Oh man, I would have got my mouth washed out with soap.
But
Now,
the point
talk
I was
about
trying to make.
cultural shock. When
So
I came here, that
think
was
we
a
just-
cultural shock.
I think we just hijacked here. James had a point.
Yeah,
sorry.
So what I wanted to lead up to was I agree with Dr. Mpindu about one way to address the problem is to encourage more people who are good to go to be cops, because power attracts corruption. Power doesn't corrupt. Power attracts corrupt people. And if we don't push more good people to positions of power, they won't be in them. And then we'll have the corrupt
James, you
ones.
should have said this before I wrote my book.
Well, I have more because I want to ask you a question, because that only attacked it from one angle. Because there's the people, I want to know because I am terrified. And the way to attack this from the societal standpoint is to go and promote more good people being cops and create a dialogue with cops. But the problem is that it's not just the bad apples, it's the bad apples and the police culture of closing ranks and the fact that they are being trained in certain you know, certain precincts and certain collections of precincts to push out the people that are good. Actively get rid of them because they are rocking the boat for the people who are the status quo. And it's entire precincts that are bad, certain bad apple precincts, not just bad apple cops.
I hear you, James, and I just wanted to mention this as well. We also have a wave of police officers who are emerging from within this culture, who are standing up for truth. Most police officers, I mean, most police jurisdictions, they have chaplains who are the religious, not just counselors, but they are life coaches, where you actually have Bible studies and you have theological schools that are happening in some of these police jurisdictions where, you see, going back to your generation, you guys, you're not too concerned about becoming the next chief. You want to do a good job, go home and be with your wife and with your kids, and you're not concerned about the next, you know, being the next guy in terms of authority. That's our generation and Bob's generation. You know, that's what we look for. But for you guys, it's different. And so within that context now, we have a generation of younger police officers who don't care about ticketing people, because the older school says the more activity you show, the more tickets you give, it shows you're busy. But the younger guys are concerned about relationships because they live in the community. So, and this is emerging within the police. One of the things I'm concerned about, like I think I mentioned it earlier, is that most of the police academies, they have these old guards who have been teaching for years. And they almost think like they need to train the younger people. So what's happening now is the police jurisdictions are saying, we want younger people who have this knowledge that the world is round, the world is a global village, to be part of the key instructors in the schools. And it's beginning to turn things around. So yes, there is fear that, you know, we need to close ranks, we need to do this, but the younger people are saying, no, I need to be vulnerable because I want to go home and be with my wife. I don't want to get killed because I didn't say anything. I want the truth to come out. This is why you find now we have women police officers who are emerging and saying there is sexual harassment in these police jurisdictions. Why? Most of them are younger ones who are saying, no, 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 no. I love my husband so much. I don't want you to make any, sexual overtones comments to me because it's an insult to who I am. I'm very loyal to my, to my spouse. And so I'm not going to tolerate that. So they go up and they report these cases. So there is hope, but like it takes a long time to turn an organization like this around. But there are some great things that are happening, I tell you, and it gets me excited. So, James, I hope you can contribute to the next book about changing the police culture.
Wow. Mel, and AJ, do you guys want to say something? We didn't hear from your guest. Is he just kind of listening and doesn't want to say anything?
So he's, I mean, we don't want to make him represent his whole generation, but he's a Gen Z. He's not 23 yet. So he's a sophomore or junior in college?
I'm a sophomore, but I'll be a junior next fall. It's been like a year and a half since I came to the US. Actually, I heard about racism back home in Ghana, but I never experienced it. When I came here, my school doesn't tolerate racism, so I've never experienced it before. And I don't know if I've kind of like met the good white guys, because my best friend is a white guy, actually.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah. So I think last 3 days, I was kind of like speaking to him about this whole George Floyd murder. And he was like, okay, Prince, like me, I grew up in a whole white neighborhood, right? But, not that we hate black guys. It's kind of like, it's a perception that they create in our mind that black guys are kind of like dangerous. So, there are some white that they don't particularly hate black guys or the black color, but it's kind of like whenever they see a black guy, because of the perception they grew up with, they become alert and they think this black guy is kind of like very dangerous and it's gonna, cause something terrible to me. So I need to maybe call 911, just to be safe, or, to escape the danger or something like that. That's why, most of, these white, people kind of like call police on black guys. I'm like, okay, but that's not necessary in our generation. I mean, and then I asked him this question. So right now, look at me. Are you afraid of me? Am I dangerous to you? I was like, please, you know me, And he travels a lot. He's been to Jordan. He has been to Chile. He has been to Argentina. Like he's on this. He's a political science major and he wanna be a lawyer. Like when he wants to go to law school, and then he does like political science, and our school has this study abroad thing. So I kind of like it enlightens them. As you said, the world is round. It's not just one continent. So I think, and most of the people out here haven't been out of the United States, so they don't know what happened. Right. So when he traveled, he has kind of like learned other people's culture, and he was like, oh, these people aren't dangerous. I mean, they are more life outside the United States. I mean, there are more life out there that, man, needs to discover. So I was like, yeah, Prince, I traveled a lot and I know many other cultures, so I'm not afraid of you, You are good. And then, actually, I think, generally speaking, I think like we, the people who are from Africa, even within the blacks out here, because I've lived in campus all my life, and then even in people that we come from Africa, we are kind of like a little bit different from people raised out here, the blacks that are raised out here. I remember a friend of mine who was black was like, Prince, I don't think, you are kind of like a bit different from us, like how you do your things, because like back home, our parents teach us to be, respect elders, and, whenever you talk, like just be respectful, like people. So, I mean, that's how I was brought up. So that's how I do with people. But a lot of Black Americans out here, or like a lot of African Americans out here, are kind of like a bit violent. Like when it comes to issues, they don't have patience and they yell, and they, it's kind of like turns into like a whole lot of talking, but I'm not like that. So they're like, oh, you are not like us. You are a bit different. You are just a little bit different. And the way we kind of like have a relationship with them is kind of like a bit different from how I had a relationship with my friends who are from Africa, straight from Africa like me. So that's my overall experience. I think our generation, which we call the Generation Z, will be able to fix this problem actually. And it's kind of like very slow process, but I believe in God that it's gonna be fine. We're gonna get through this.
Good for you. There's hope. There's hope.
Amen.
There's hope. Thank you for that. AJ and Mel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead first.
Well, so we talked a little bit about that there is a difference if in your culture your ancestors owned the ancestors of the person who is your neighbor. Then there is if you
hold your thoughts for a quick minute. I want everyone else, because we are going to come to a close once everyone has said their thing. But in the meantime, while the rest of the people are saying what they need to say, I would like to encourage you to think about one thing that you are going to commit to, that you're going to do this week, to help with this problem. It does not need to be a huge thing. It does not need to be something that it has to be something that you are uncomfortable doing. For example, for me, I know when I come out of this, I'm going to send an email or a text to one of my friends whom I've been feeling some kind of way because they have not liked anything that I have said about George Floyd. They have not liked anything I have said about race. They have not liked anything. And yet, when I do post a scripture, they are the first one to say to comment and or to send me a private message, saying this really spoke to me. So I've been feeling some kind of way about them. Say, but why are you kind of silent on this? So I want to reach out to them and have a conversation rather than me assuming that they are racist. I want to talk to them and hear what they have to say. So everyone else, just think about one thing that you are going to commit to, and this group right here is going to hold you accountable to it. So you make that choice, and then we will hold you accountable at our next conversation, that you need to come back and report that this is what I did and this is what happened. Go ahead, Miss Mel. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, it's okay. Actually, that made me feel really guilty because I've been feeling, so I'm not exactly a boomer or a Gen X. I'm in that cusp in the late 60s that we don't know what we are. And so I think we're like the whatever generation because we're like, whatever, just whatever. And I feel like recently we're generation whatever. Yeah. So I'm almost a boomer. By some definitions, I'm a boomer, but it surely doesn't fit my cultural. It doesn't fit me culturally, I guess. So so now I'm feeling this terrible, like a guilt for my whole generation that's been really weighing me down during this whole thing. And I think whatever needs to be over. And I think I want to call, I don't want to swear, but I think I need to call BS on my generation publicly because it's BS. Because I just about this whole thing, like we will say, oh, we'll post Bible verses every day and so forth and so on. And so many people, I mean, I can't tell you how many people of my generation, my relatives, my own sister, they've all gone on the Facebook or whatever, the Facebook, that's what my dad says. And they do this, oh my God, I feel so bad about George Floyd dying, but I can't condone looting. Well, if you feel so bad, why didn't you say something when it happened? Why'd you wait for 3 days till somebody was looting something? I just feel, because I feel like that's where the whatever was. Oh my God. another, yep, this happens all the time. Everybody with these video cameras, and look at that guy looking into the camera. Obviously he enjoyed it, and it's a terrible thing, but I'm not really wanting to rock the boat, so I'm not going to say anything publicly. And then all of a sudden, people are so tired of, I'm not saying that I think that looting is the answer for anything. I'm not saying that at all, but if you think that it's terrible to destroy property and you didn't think it was terrible to destroy people, you're surely in the middle of whatever. So maybe I need to, write this little paper that's been in my head calling BS on my generation and make a list like the old Peggy McIntosh white privilege list. I can do this and I can do this. If you say this, but you didn't say anything about this, then I'm calling it on you, because, wake up and stop with the whatever. There is whatever. Yeah. That's all I want to say. Sorry. Now you guys got me all upset because now I feel like I was just going to listen because listening is important. Yeah. I told Prince that his generation got to fix it because it's over for us. Yeah. I told his whole class that when he was my student. I guess.
I like that whatever.
Oh, right. Generation of whatever. Here, present.
No, I guess for me I mean, I pretty much said what I wanted to say, I guess, and I've just come to realize that, this is a problem that for my generation and generations before us and so on, is whatever generation that is. I don't know. It's something that I know that I'd like to. It would be great to be able to say, hey, my generation can fix this, but in my feeling is that we can't, because it's so ingrained into us. But I really want to try.
Yeah.
I really want to try.
Amen.
And I know that the first thing I think that I need to do is just listen. I need to find somebody to go and talk to and just listen, or not talk to, just sit down and listen to them and listen to their stories and what they've had to go through, and I'll never be able to totally relate to it, but just to try to get a glimpse of what it's like.
Empathy.
I think that's the thing that I need to do. And also too, just the last thing is, one thing is realizing, yes, the world is round, and we talked about how many Americans don't travel 50 miles from their home,
or everybody,
but I grew up in an area where there wasn't a lot of black people when I was growing up. I mean, there are now more, but there wasn't, and it wasn't until actually that we moved. Came to the Albany area here, and then actually going to Zimbabwe in Africa was to me just an absolutely mind-blowing experience. Seeing being all of a sudden I'm the minority, that's what Teresa, you were talking about how you weren't afraid of the police. I was afraid of the police there. I'm here to tell you. I went through roadblocks, and I'm telling you, it was the first time I realized I'm in a car with a bunch of black people. I'm the only white person here, really. And that guy over there is a black man. He's got an AK-47, and I know if I'm mistaken, I'm in trouble. That was an incredible thing. I suddenly realized, holy cow, there are people out there that don't like me very much.
It's really good for us.
Yeah, it is. It did teach me that whole experience taught me the idea of learning to see things from different perspectives, from different places. We had an experience when we were there. It's
called the blessed. It's called what is it called? I think it's the blessed sense of insecurity.
Yeah. It really is. We picked up a newspaper there in Zimbabwe. It was I think the only English one there anyway. But on the front page, we were only there for 2 weeks. So we thought, what could happen in the world in 2 weeks? there's a big mushroom cloud on the front page, and it says Israel and U.S. spoil for war. And we thought, what happened? We thought maybe a nuclear war had happened. And then we were reading it, and it was an airstrike that happened in the Middle East and everything. And the sense was like, all of a sudden we realized, wow, there are people out there, there are countries out there and people out there that don't like us as Americans and don't hate people. Well, that's really weird. You know, you're not used to that at all. So, you know, I have told other people and other kids growing up and so on, listen, I told them, you know, when you graduate high school, or try to travel somewhere, go somewhere, see something from a different perspective than what you're used to. You know, go online, read blogs and things like that from other people in other countries, and just try to get different perspectives on things. You know, rather than just looking at what you see all the time. You know, try to get a different perspective on stuff. So,
yeah,
that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Generation Whatever. Miss Janet. Mom, are you still with us?
You're still on mute, Mom.
There we go. Let's say it. Let's see what's.
Oh, Dad is home.
Yeah. So, I came to listen, and I came because I love my kids and
grandkids.
Yeah, grandkids. But I came late, so I just want to kind of I don't want to really, I don't have anything to say right now because I feel like I need to listen. But I do have to say, my Melissa pushes me because she knows I work in a very Trumpy environment. I'm a nurse, and actually I think everybody should have to work with people that they don't like, because it forces you to get along, because I have to get along. People's lives depend on me trusting these women, and the thing that people, I mean, it's really easy. I mean, I used to be jealous. See, I said I wasn't going to talk. This is what happens. You shouldn't let me talk.
Where's the mute?
I am, I guess, generation whatever. And my sister was in the 60s, and I was like, wow, she could be there, you know, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and she could be there, and, you know, it's all over. I've got nothing, you know, and now all this is happening, and now I'm old. So it's like, it feels overwhelming. Because I think if I was in my 20s, I'd be like, oh, let me out there. But I know I have to be out there anyway. You know, so my point is, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but my point is that it's good to see people as complicated and many faceted, because it was easier in my 20s to say, you guys are jerks, I hate you all, you stupid people. But what's conflicting is they're not stupid. They love these people that are awful, love their children, and they are good nurses, and they're good people, and they do loving things, and they don't even see themselves as racist. Like, they would be surprised if I said, you know, you're a big racist. I show them pictures of my grandchildren, and they're like, oh my God, they're so cute, they're so smart. And I was like, yeah, and they're so black. Like, why don't you see that you are a racist? Why can't you see that? And it's people that I trust in an emergency, when somebody's life's in danger. These are people that have my back if something's happening, and I put the call bell on and they all come in. Like, there's good parts to it. What I'm saying is, there are good parts to these people, and it's too easy when you only live with people that think the way that you do to feel superior or to feel like you can fight them. And so I was quiet for a long time because I have to work with them, and I don't block them on my Facebook because I work with them. So I was quiet for a long time, and then my Melissa pointed out that being quiet is not being quiet, it's making a statement. So now I got a statement. So now I make statements, but you have to push myself to do more than that. That was very difficult for me, and I've been doing it. I mean, it's scary. Like, okay, I'm being vocal on Facebook, and now I gotta go face my Trumpies. It's it makes me nervous, but because I'm a coward, but I'm pushing myself. I have to push myself. And I'm also scared because my son, who I respect and I think is smart and the best dad, and I'm so proud of him, was a real asshole as a teenager and scared the crap out of me and did really
He
scary.
disappeared.
He's gone.
Wait, what happened?
I'm scared because of the way he talks to police. And then when I say, oh my gosh, if my grandchildren are like my son, and then my grandchildren will be killed, and that's very terrifying for me. So that terrifies me.
Yeah.
He got away with a lot and didn't even know that he was getting away with a lot. He knows now because he's a mature, intelligent man. There we go.
Yes, he is.
Gotta fool the algorithm.
As a teenager, he was not respectful of authority, and it scares me. And it's scary. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. I also thought you were talking directly to me, Pastor. My white family, you know who you are.
I saw you tagging everybody. I was like, oh my God. I saw that and I said, oh, she's calling everybody. I'm going to be called out. I want all of us to be called out at the same time. Hey, what is family for, right?
All right.
I appreciate you though.
Talking to me.
No, I was talking to the other family. Mr. Kelly, would you like to say something?
Well, yes, I kind of do. I want to throw a little bit of an encouragement out here. When I grew up, all the police were white. There would be nobody taking a knee. No one.
Wow.
And so I think there is change. A lot of change got to come about because there is systemic issues. I mean, the fact that this one guy had 15 complaints and nothing was addressed, it's incredible. But there are a lot of people, like was said earlier today, that they relate differently. The younger generation relates differently to the people out there, and I think that's really encouraging. And I don't know where I was. There was something else I had to say. I do want to comment about what I did tonight. You know, while this was going on, it was great to hear this in the car while I'm at a COVID protest where all these cars are going in line to this site that was made for remembering the 9/11 people who died in Bucks County, Pennsylvania here. And I thought, well, it takes me 10 minutes to get there. It'd probably be a short thing. It was 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours of all these hundreds of cars going through, and they're all beeping and waving and shouting, encouraging. When I get there, there are all these signs that talk about things that we need to do, things that we've done in the past. It was very encouraging for Black Lives Matter. Yeah,
wow.
Absolutely. So that was an encouraging thing, and I did appreciate a lot of what was said today. It was very encouraging.
Praise God.
And I think if I'm going to do something, it's going to whenever I hear somebody talking against police,
Mhm.
or talking against the people or black people or whatever. I want to share, the humanity in us all,
Yes.
because that is often missing. We are often just looking at one side or the other, and it's scary. Protesters are not the looters.
Mm,
All right.
yes,
The
yes.
looters
I'm
and the
good.
protesters are separate groups. Let's not
Yeah.
mix them.
Right. Like that.
That's right. That's a good point.
There are people who are taking advantage of this, and then they are coming in with committing crime.
Yes, very destructive. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated this.
Oh, it's our pleasure, sir, to be of service. Mark and Debbie, you are the last on the list. Would you like to say something?
Thank you very much for doing this dialogue tonight and for inviting us all to participate. And answer your question of what are we going to do in this next week that is outside our comfort zone. We are scheduling conversations with Black friends that we have, where we just want to sit with them for the evening and hear their stories and then pray for them.
Amen.
So that's what we'll be doing.
Wow, great, great. Thank you so much, Debbie. I appreciate it. You've always been a prayer warrior. So thank you so much. That's great. So those of you who haven't given their one commitment, let's hear them. Let's hear them. Mr. Bob, what are you committing to? Mr. VK, Dr. Francis, yes, you are in Canada, but we still want to know, there are some bad apples in Canada. What are you going to commit to? And James, James and Melissa, James and Melissa, what are you committing to?
I'm going to share because I'm going to sign off here.
Yeah,
okay.
Getting late for me too.
Yeah, maybe I should. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say anything because I'm so far away from the United States. You guys may not even understand what's happening up here. So.
Okay, that's okay then. Let's go on to Bob.
Wow. Well, it's hard for me.
Thank you for volunteering, Brother Bob. I was waiting that somebody would be my savior.
Well, no,
other than the Lord Jesus.
It's hard because you're asking me to commit something, but I'm already there. It's like
you are there. Yes, you are.
I'm in the middle of it right now. So how do I commit to something I'm already knee deep in?
I think all of us are kind of, the people that are here, really, they are. And there are some, like for instance, one of the things that I certainly will commit to is to changing the wording. Like, remember I asked, do you believe, I asked about privilege, and you corrected me in a very diplomatic way that that's not what you really, those are not the words you want to use.
No, it's
right. It depends the context.
So I am going to change that as well. So there is something out of this conversation that you might be saying, you know what, maybe there is something else that I can add on to this, or kind of shift a little bit and talk about this in a different way. Mr. VK.
Oh, right, okay. What I'm going to commit to? Oh, well, that's a good question. Maybe I'll commit to, I don't know, maybe speaking less.
Then that defeats the whole point of dialogue. How are you? Okay, yeah, I guess you could listen. You could listen. Yeah.
Well, maybe let me expand just a little bit on that. Speak less, but try and ignite a conversation.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. That works. That works. That works. With people you generally don't speak with.
Yeah, it's that's kind of complicated because I speak to. I like to speak, and I speak to people at the gas station when we're pumping gas. Somebody across from me, it's very easy for me. I often strike a conversation, and
you're like James.
BK, you and I have so much in common.
Yeah. So, whatever, a conversation, and sometimes my family, my wife or my kids, they'll be like, okay, do you know that person? I'm like, no, actually, I don't even know their name. We just
That's James. That's James.
15 minutes. 15 minutes intensive conversation.
Yep. Oh
where we share. Now, don't you see? Like I said, I speak. You know how people say you gotta know somebody before you share some deep stuff and all that. Well, in my world, I don't have that. We'll meet somebody at the gas station and we're talking, or we'll share the deepest parts of whatever I need to share, or whatever. Yeah, and instant connection. And as soon as we're done, I probably will never meet again. I don't remember their name. They don't remember mine too. And you know, and life goes on.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining us at the dialogue with Pastor T. I really do appreciate all of you, and I appreciate the fact that you stayed up until now. I wasn't anticipating us being this long, but I also felt like we still had some things that we wanted to at least share for tonight. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate the time that you took to come here to share and to listen. Because a lot of times we don't listen. We have been given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so that we utilize these two and less of this. So I'm grateful that you guys came in, and I am calling you all to come back on the next dialogue. Next Thursday, we are going to do it again, and hopefully we will lessen the time. We want to lessen the time, perhaps because this was more of an introductory, so people were loaded. They had been headed, you know, they wanted to say, we all wanted to say what we needed to say. So I'm hoping that we can have this on a regular basis. And for those of you who are going to be available on Sunday, I'm talking to the leaders, the church leaders, the community leaders, to say, hey, church, what is your response to this systematic racism? What is the church supposed to be doing? What does the word of God say about the approach that the church is doing? Because sadly, if any of you have been following, the church seems to have been really quiet. Especially, you know, the mega churches, the big churches. You're not hearing much from them. Here and there, you will hear a little statement, but we want to hear serious movement. We want to hear true leadership coming out of the church. So we are going to be talking about that on a Sunday. Mr. Bob is going to be there. Dr. Mpindu is going to be there. Mr. VK is also going to be there. So please, join us either via Zoom. I'm going to be posting the information over. Hopefully our Facebook will be working. But whichever way you decide to join us, please do. Again, thank you for joining us right here at the dialogue with Pastor T. And it has been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure and honor to serve you. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Pastor T. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aunt Teresa. God bless you.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you. All right.
Glory to God. Oh, James, stay on. I want you to teach me something. Did you leave already? Okay, who else is still on?
I'm trying to leave.
We are up. And Dr. Frank is trying to leave. Where we are? We are up in Guinea block of 667.
Okay.
Guinea Angel block of 667. Yeah, you can say that again. You can say that again. So anyway, can't you swing? Okay, there you go. Can't you put loke kona kumbega ko amboni kuhle? So okay, kanya kuyithi song too. So gulomunyu baba did I send you the picture of you guys for Saturday for the men's one? Oh wait, no, wait.
Oh,
I need to
stop.
You're
still recording.
Yes, that's what I just recognized.